Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of our breakdown of hockeyprospect.com final rankings, mainly the top 32. Um, in part one, we discuss player ranked from 32 to 17, and now it's time to talk about players ranked from 16 to 1. Just before we get going, just a quick reminder. Um, you can buy our book, the NHL Draft Breakdown, on hockeyprospect.com for $19.99, 50% off from what the price was last year. It's a new version of our book, very similar to the Black Book, except the profiles are a bit shorter compared to what we used to do. So take a look at that. I'll put the link in the description on YouTube, so you can quickly and easily find where to go to get the book. Brad, let's start talking about our top 16 ranked player, and we'll start with Kurban Limatov out of Russia. A big, one of the top athlete, I would say, in this class, a top five athlete. Great size, great skater, a guy who really made some really good progress this season, because we did talk about him at the start of the year, and one of my line was, I can't wait to see this guy in February. Well, he was pretty good in February, so he did start moving up on our list. He's a freak athlete, as we like to say. I think there's some secondary offense to his game, but he's still very raw. But I think he defends really well. The skating is, again, it's good for, because he loves to rush the puck. But if I talk about mostly his defensive coverage, it really helps him. He's very aggressive. Sometimes he's going to take some risk, but he does have the athletic ability, the skating ability to get back into his position. I think he's gonna need some work for some of his positional game. Sometimes he can get carried away a bit, but that's normal at this age. Usually, if they get some good coaching in the next few years, usually players will figure things out defensively. But actually, we like his play in his own zone. He's just sometimes he's almost like a wild horse that you find in the desert. You need to bring them to the ranch and work with them a bit. That's a bit the case with that player. I think he really improved some his decision making this season. That was what was lacking a bit at the start of the year. I mean, he's not a perfect player as far as hockey sense goes. We saw enough improvement in that regards that we're not too scared of ranking him where we have him ranked. If we're really concerned about his hockey sense, he would not be ranked 16. So there's a lot to like here. I don't know much like offensively. He's going to be like, what is he going to be offensively at the NHL level? Like, is he like going to be a number one power play guy? I don't think so, but he does have at times, Brad. Like, we have seen it, like some crazy moment offensively where you're like, whoa, like this is coming out of nowhere, basically. So he's a really exciting player. My player comp for him, I'm unsure if it's a good one, but I'll say it anyway because it was the one that I said at the start of the year. Like, he was a bit like a Philip Broberg um, style player to me. Similar size, similar skating ability, left D. We were really questioning Broberg for his hockey sense in his draft year, and we rank him more as a late first round pick, and then he ended up being a top 10 pick. He has figured things out at the NHL level, as we saw this year with the Blues. I think with time, Limitov will figure things out, and I think he's going to become like a really solid two-way defenseman that can play on the top four, a top four role at the NHL level. and play a lot of minutes. Like he's a beast physically, and he has a lot of stamina. He can play a lot of minutes. I think I don't think anybody is as high on him as we are. But I know some NHL staff that he's their number one guy out of Russia this year. I don't know if they have him as high as we have on the overall ranking, but for a prospect out of Russia, like I've heard his name being mentioned as the number one guy, um, numerous time. So, Brad, maybe you can start with maybe your take on Kurban Limatov, who played for Dynamo Moscow Junior this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the best development curves in this draft. When we first watched him, incredibly raw, as Joel mentioned, got to tame the horse. I thought, or you just take the Chernobyl mutant and try to take him out of there and see what you can do with him if you give him time. And it's one of those situations where you're dealing with an incredibly powerful and strong player for his age category, and that means that he's going to be prone to making some mistakes on the ice because he's not thinking like a 5'8", 5'9" defenseman. He can just kind of run through players. My player comp for him is Ivan Provorov, but not the version that was actually a prospect. The new version that's kind of like much more secondary offense, might not be a power play too, but can move the puck, can skate the puck, and can defend and be physical and can kind of chip in everywhere. That is kind of the way that I look at Ivan Provorov's game currently. I thought he had a pretty good season in Columbus last year. So very similarly sized. One of the most powerful players in this entire class. So he can hold physically better than almost anybody. He's almost impossible to box out net front. Like, I can't even imagine how powerful this kid's going to be at 24. He's going to be such a handful to deal with. He's a lot meaner than some of these other defensemen we've talked about here. Rombach, Hensler, like he's meaner than them. He will turn kids into human spin tops and leave them in the dust. The huge thing with him is the curve headed in the right direction because he was prone to matrix style glitches in his thought process, where he would make some beautiful reads, and he showed excellent neutral zone processing rates under pressure when it came to finding out how to alleviate the pressure with his playmaking. But then he was really prone to like really loud mistakes, much in the same way that Hensler was, but even at a higher level and in the MHL. So that was where we were extremely concerned with his play. But as he continued to progress, he started to clean that up, started to exit at a higher rate, and that allowed him to start generating more offense. And that was where things got very interesting. He was a player that, much like a Fiddler, early in the season, had a lot of difficulty on the power play, chaining and connecting plays together. I thought Limatov started doing a much better job of that, creating sequences that actually looked like they would translate successfully. And then off the rush drone, we saw it together. We were blown away with some of the sequences he managed to generate, like just really sophisticated, high-end dynamic offense, which quite frankly, we thought we wouldn't see. So one of the huge takeaways with this player for me, this is where drafting, you got to get a bit lucky. If you get the wrong games, you're not going to see the interpretation of this player we're talking about. You have to have a huge a variety of games, and then really it's split. Like if you took 20 games total, 10 could look like he's not going to ever play, doesn't look like he thinks the game, kind of doesn't look like he understands how to create sequences and generate chain reactions on the ice that will allow him to produce and hold defensively. And then other games, you're like, oh my God, this kid has so much untapped potential. Like this kid could be a dominant two-way top four defenseman with a tremendous amount of physical ability. So I would say he's up there with like Lakovic in terms of range of opinions. Like some people have no time for this player. Other people have a ton of time. It just depends, I think, on the viewings you get. We think there's a tremendous amount there, though, and we think he's just starting to untap his potential.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read some, different opinions on him, just read his profile on in our book. Read the quotes from NHL scouts. Like some will agree with us to an extent, and some of them think we're crazy, basically, having him that high. They think he's a third pairing defenseman. Some think he's not even a good skater. I don't know. that was probably the most shocking quote for me in the book this year. So I don't expect him to go as high as this in the draft, but I'm really curious to see where he's gonna go. He was at the combine, so that will help. He's also gonna be at the Florida combine. And I believe he will be at the NHL draft too in person. So he's probably sticking around the U.S. for a long time since he's been Buffalo at the start of the month. So he's going to be here for a while. So that will do it for Kurban Limatov. We go to number 15, Ryker Lee from Madison of the USHL. Michigan State commit will play there next year. USHL Rookie of the Year. Well, he simply had an amazing year in the USHL. His first year playing with Madison. Madison not really well known for producing like really high draft picks in the NHL draft, but I mean, if you according to us, I think Ryker Lee should be a high draft pick because we think this kid is as talented as some of the kids that are ranked top 10. His one-on-one skills are as maybe good as anyone in the draft. He's at least I would say top 5 for sure. Smart player, can really shoot the puck. The only really drawback to him is his skating. The skating is the question mark next to his name. Overall, I really like this player. In a draft when we look for talent, and it's even you were mid first, and sometimes it's hard to really see guys that are clear top six forward. There's no question Ryker Lee. If he plays in the NHL, that's where he's playing. I think he's going to be an incredible power play guy with more space, more time on the ice. And he's ranked 15, which is pretty high. I mean, I have not seen this player ranked that high anywhere else. We did this a few years ago with Brink, who plays with the Flyers, who was like the USHL, one of the top player in the USHL, and he kind of like he's playing in the NHL, but I don't think he's as like. I think we probably add him too high based on what he has done so far at the NHL level. But he's also 5'8", so Ryker Lee actually was like that size a few years ago, but he has grown quite a lot since then. Now he's just over 6 feet, so there's a lot to like with this player. He is off to Michigan State, who was maybe the number one NCAA team next year. So it's going to be interesting to see his role on the team. Like he could end up playing with Caden Lidstrom. Isaac Howard might be back for one last season. So Michigan State they're gonna be really good next year. So it's gonna be fun to see what role Ryker Lee does end up having on the team. Brad, maybe you can continue, but I know he's one of your favorite prospects in this class. So I'll let you give your take on Ryker Lee.
Yeah, sure. I mean, he's a magician, right? He's a wizard. I saw a poll on the Athletic that was suggesting like what the top 10 skill players are in the draft. He wasn't on the list. James Hagen doesn't have as much handling ability as this kid, like straight up. They all pull James Hagen as the best puck touch. This kid has a better puck touch than James Hagen. Straight, really does. Doesn't skate like James Hagen. Certainly has a better puck touch. This player is legitimately a magician with the puck. Like rabbit out of the hat, do things you just haven't seen in any other prospect in this class. When he's setting up his give and go sequences, he can use hesitation feints and multi-touch plays that just set up so that he can extend his windows and operate within those windows in a way that's very sophisticated, very difficult for opposing defenses to detect. And the result of that is because of his handling rates. His hands are so good, and he's so good at naturally masking if he's going to shoot or pass that it makes him so tricky to read. He remains untelegraphed basically at all times. And then you take into consideration his processing rates, which I think are like vastly superior to Cullen Potter's as an example or for a contrast. It just lets him be totally dominant. Like it was a playground for him essentially. And it was his first. It was very similar to Zorofsky in that sense. That's where, with the NHL scouts' opinion, where there's some crossover, I really agree with it. Like, he basically turned the rink into a playground for him, just like Zorofsky did in the MHL, and they were rookies. So it was very interesting to watch. Definitely does have some junior in him. He can be prone to making extremely high risk, high dangerous plays, but extraordinary talents, you need to give them some of that opportunity. Like, they can pull off plays that other players just can't pull off. So, for instance, when he's under pressure in the neutral zone and he has to backpedal and he's trying to find an option, like, I've seen him thread backhand passes through two separate triangles directly on the tape of his teammate, and it was an off look, and it was like a weak side stretch pass. I was like, oh my God, if he turned it over, he has no recovery skill set. His skating's not good enough, and it didn't matter because it hit the tape, right? So it's one of those things where he has so much talent, it just supersedes the limiting factor with the toolkit. Now, when it comes to skating, to Jerome's point, he just grew recently. I believe he was like, what was he, 5'7", Jerome? Was he 5'7"? Now he's 6.5. So, or close to 6.5. So we think that that's part of the reason that there's an issue with some of the coordination. Maybe the best way to characterize his skating is that he lacks launch fluidity, and he looks like he has a piano strapped to him at times, or like a strong man. They strap the truck and they start dragging the truck, like Pudzianowski in his prime. There's a bit of that. That's kind of the problem with Ryker Lee at this time. That said, it's interesting because his upper frame is incredibly nimble. He has like the best hands you'll ever see. And then his lower frame is not nearly as nimble. So it's interesting. There's a catch-up quality to that. But his interviews were very good at the Combine. We know that. So that he knows what he needs to work on as well. So, there's not many of this player. Okay, there isn't. Really, I can't even think of a comp. I really can't. I can't think of a single comp in the NHL right now for him. Sergei Samsonov. There was a bit of Sergei Samsonov, I thought, in his skill set. That's not a great comp either, okay? Samsonov had way better edge work and worked differently, but some of the way they use their hands in playmaking, I thought was similar. But this is one of the best natural dual threats in the class. He has the best hands in the class. Yes, they're better than Hagens. And the sky's the limit if he can continue to increase his skating gear. If he can get his skating, like, let's put it this way. If this kid had Cullen Potter skating, then there's no chance that this player is not at least top 5 or 6, right? That's how talented, how gifted he is. It's just the skating is a limiting factor at this time. So I thought his compete improved as the season progressed as well, Jerome. I'd say that was one aspect. He matured a little bit off the puck and started recognizing that pressurizing opposing teams would lead to more offense when he was off the puck at times. So, but there is Junior. He does have to reduce his risk. He does have to learn how to mitigate his risk, just like Zorofsky. Okay, there is overlap there. But we're a weird staff in the sense that sometimes we put players that we know are really going to play, even if their ceilings look slightly more limited, very high. And then sometimes I think as a staff, we compensate for that by saying, you know what? Caution to the wind. We love these players. They're super skilled. Yeah, there's high risk. We don't care. And that's an example of this right now.
I mean, just one last thing about his skating. Like, I remember at the start of the year, the phrase, having a piano on his back was like, that's what I said. I was like, oh God, like, the skating looks really bad. But I, honestly, you mentioned the compete improving in the second half of the season. I think the skating also improved because you look at how he was skating in October and looking at what he did in February, March. There's improvement there. So it doesn't mean he has nothing else to work on. Like, he still has a lot of work to do with his skating, but at least we see improvement, and that's why we keep we watch a lot of games from pretty much every month. We try to get viewings of every key players, just to see if we see any improvement, sometimes there's no improvement and they actually regress. And usually that's not a good sign. But in this case, I thought the skating was a bit better in the second half, and that's all I want. Like, you want to see those players improve as the season goes on. So we got that with Ryker Lee, with the skating. You mentioned the compete, and obviously the skill level is, he's a human highlight reel machine on the ice. So fun to watch. We feel pretty confident about him at 15. No clue where he's going to go in the draft, obviously. in a draft where there's a lack of like real talent, I think a team will be smart to take him in the I would say the top 20. Um, all right, let's move on to number 14. Cole Reschny out of the Western Hockey League, Victoria Royals, and he's off to University of North Dakota next season. Great move for him because he does need to get stronger, and the college route is really good for that. He's going to be able to hit the gym, get more explosive. That's the player I mean, I'll talk just for me. I struggled with him this season. I had like, not that I did not have time for him in the first half of the season. Like I respected the talent, but I thought he was really passive. I felt like he was waiting for the play to happen before actually committing. In the second half, he was creating plays. He was being active on the ice. He disrupt a lot more plays in the second half than he did in the first half. And then you combine this with a player who has really good hockey sense. He's really good in all three zones. He's not the best skater. He's not the biggest guy. Actually, I say the skating. I think technically he's a good skater. He has no power. He has no, he lacks a lot of power with his skating stride. And we think if he gets stronger, like that that could and should change in the coming years. He's a center. He's about 5'10", so not exactly like, maybe at center it doesn't work for him at the NHL level. We'll see. I think it will really depend on how much his skating can improve with more power output. But he's a player we like. I think he's very smart. He had a great second half, amazing playoff with Victoria, a great U18 also at the end. Lots to like here. One of the more improved player in the second half. I think him and Brady Martin are the two guys in the CHL who improved the most as far as improving their point per game in the second half. So that's usually a really good sign. So overall, we like this player. Obviously, ranked 14. We think he's got possibly top six upside here. If not, there's so much hockey sense with this player, and now that he competes hard, um, he could fit on the third line role if there's not if he can't find a role on the top six. I think he could like adapt his game to be a third line player if needed. But I think there's enough skill here and August sense that he could be a top six guys in the NHL after, I would say, probably going to play at least 2 years in college. So after that, I think he could challenge for a roster spot in the NHL. Brad, what's your take on Cole Reschny?
Yeah, well, to your point, like when it comes to curves, like he's right up there with Limatov for us in terms of like just really figuring out what he has to be. So like one of the distinguishing qualities of him relative to a lot of these other players we're talking about, and especially a player like Lakovic, is he's not as gifted as Lakovic, but he's way better at understanding when he needs to blend technique with that secondary, that tertiary skill set where he's physical, where he's aggressive, where he's assertive. Like this is a small player, but he has no problem using his lateral agility to try to sidestep around the goal line, come back out in front of the net, create a jamming play if something else isn't working for him during the game. Like if he's getting boxed out, if he's having difficulty in transition, there are backups to backups offensively for him to try. So he plays much bigger than size. He's not afraid. As Jerome mentioned, very good vision, very smart, calculated player. The skill level is interesting. Like the skill, I feel like he's not as gifted a playmaker as Kindell. And mechanically speaking, I would say his shot is actually slightly under Kindell's as well. But his handling is better. But then there's a large range of outcomes within him from a technical perspective, much like Gastrine, not to the same degree, but it's in that realm, which is unique because usually you see that in bigger players, where Gastrine, he's only 6.5 feet and Reschny's 5'11". So I find that interesting that despite being a bit older, that he seems to be a bit sporadic with his skill set. Now, of course, during the playoffs, it really came alive, and he really became very consistent. And one thing for me, for all of you that got to listen to the goaltending list, like I got to watch a lot of him versus Ravensburgen, and he was very dominant against Ravensburgen. And Ravensburgen's a very good goalie prospect, so it kind of tells you how adaptive he can be in environments against top end goalies and against bigger defensemen. He seems to always find a way to be involved, even if his toolkit suggests he won't be. So I'm with you, Jerome. I think the power skating's everything. His whole career, to me, is predicated on his power skating and how much more that gets dialed up within his game.
All right, number 13, Victor Eklund, out of Djurgården, Sweden. Um, Impossible to not like this player, Brad. Very fun player to scout, actually. Like it, some players are good player, but they're not as fun to scout. Like this kid is all pedal to the metal. Will go. He's not the biggest guy, but he doesn't care. He will battle. He's not gonna win all those battles because there's some limitation physically, but he has a huge heart. Pretty similar to his brother, but there's some difference between him and William, who's with the San Jose Sharks. I think Victor is a better skater. I think Victor shoots the puck better, more physical. I think William probably has more. I'm gonna say he has more hockey sense. It's not even a knock on Victor, but I will give the edge for hockey sense for William. We have Victor 13. William was I believe seventh overall pick by the Sharks. I could see Victor being the better of the two, but we'll see. I think it's pretty close. If you're trying to project if Victor will be better than his brother, smart player, high compete. Sometimes you have smaller player like him. Okay, they skate fast, they compete, they're good playmaking, but they don't really have a shot to score goals. They have to get really close to the net to score goals because they can't beat goalies from distance. It's not the case with Victor. He can beat goalies from distance, um, so that's going to help him translate his game offensively. Most of the year we had him and Carter Bear really in the same group basically. I think we picked Carter Bear because we feel like physically his game will translate better than Victor. But it's not even a knock on Victor. Like we love this player. Maybe just there's some limitation with his size. He's an older kid in this draft class. He's only 169 pounds. Like how much mass, how much physically is he gonna be able to add to his frame in the next 2-3 years? He's never gonna shy away from competing one on one or those 50-50 battles. When he gets to the NHL and he has to play against you know 6'5", 225-pound player, mean like a Liam Biskel, it's for example, or a Moritz Seider. You can name any defenseman like this. It's going to be a bit more difficult for him. But we know he has the heart. I feel like guys like him tends to drop a bit on draft day. If you think he should go top 10. Usually guys like him, they sometimes will drop come draft day. Similar to Zach Benson a few years ago, was viewed as a top 10 guy. Did drop a bit to the Sabres. He's been in the NHL the last 2 years. I think the Sabres probably rushed him at 18. But I think overall Benson will be good. But I feel like Victor might be a better version of Benson because of the skating. Benson has never been a gifted skater. Like we like him a lot. There's a lot to like, but for a smaller guy, he didn't have like that great skating that we want. Victor does have that. So, the Sabres are drafting 9. Do they go with Victor Eklund at number 9? Similar to Zach Benson, and they have drafted a lot of smaller player. Consta Elenius last year, a smaller guy. I mean, Matthew Savoie is not there anymore, but he was a smaller guy too. I think draft wise, I just mentioned the Sabres, but I think he's not going to go farther than 13. I'm going to predict if he's there at 13, Detroit, the Red Wings will take him. I'd be very surprised if he's not selected by the Red Wings if he's there at 13. Brad, I'll let you go here on Victor Eklund, the guy we watch a lot this year.
Oh, you gave me two comps to work off. So first, his brother, I would say that you mentioned the skating and the escapability. So that's one of the fundamental differences between the two is that William would create fake contact points in the ice to offset the defense, put them in lanes that the William Eklund wasn't going to take, and then he would spin off pressure or just evade pressure entirely as a result of that fake contact point generation. Where with his brother here, Victor is much more prone to saying, "Do you want outwork me? Pin me. I'm going to work through this check. I'm going to fight along the boards, and I'll just simply use my physicality, even though I'm smaller and don't have the leverage advantages." So he's a much more of a workhorse type of mentality. I would say he's the precept processing. You mentioned like the vision, the ability to think 2-3 steps ahead is a bit more limited in Victor than William, but it's still very good. Yeah. And again, some of these players like Cullen Potter doesn't have to have that much, right? Because he has so many other tools. Well, Victor Eklund's very much in the same boat. He can skate, incredible high octane motor, keeps an incredible pace of play, and does relentless. And so, and you get exactly what you want from him every shift. It's very rare that he has a bad shift or a shift where he lets up too much. So it's one of those situations where, admittedly, what you see is what you're going to get, but what you're going to get is really good. And so, we have him at 13, but make no mistake, if he ends up 10, 11, 12, even in a redraft, or maybe even the top 10, like we could see it. It's just, we try to balance the potential growth rate of some of these players, specifically one we're about to talk about in the very coming up here. And it can be very tricky because I know a lot of you are thinking, okay, well, he was dominant Allsvenskan. He's better than Frondell this season. We have Frondell higher. It's true. And the reality is, though, we have to look at what he is. So he's a winger for sure. Okay. He's not going to play center. And then he's not very big. And there's not a lot of growth rate potential left. We don't think. So it's one of those situations where he looks like a top 6 winger who's fantastic, who will really help you in a playoff series, but he's not a franchise alterer. Where some of these other kids that we're getting to now, we think enter that realm. And that's one of the defining features to why we left him outside that range. But there's a lot of debate to be had there. And we have had him higher than this. So this point in the draft where I feel like, Jerome, I remember like we had so many of different players in this range cycled through, like trying to figure out exactly the right order to do this. But make no mistake, Eklund is fantastic. And he's going to be very, very useful in regular season hockey, playoff hockey, and he'll be all situations. You can put him on a penalty kill, you can put him on a power play unit, you can put him everywhere. So there's a ton to like there.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Eklund had some really good feedbacks from the combine. He did well in interviews. I forgot to say the same thing about Reschny. Reschny also had the same, similar feedbacks. One thing about those two players is that they know what they are. They know what their game is all about. They know what they need to work on. So that is usually music to scouts' ear. Like they love when sometimes players just have no have no idea what their game is all about, and that's very usually not good news for scouts or for teams, willing to pick them because they're like, "Oh, we have a lot to work here with this player." I mean, when the player know exactly what he's good at and what he needs to work at, that's usually scouts are all on board with this. Okay, let's move on to number 12, and I'm sure we're gonna have a lot to say about him. His name is Roger McQueen from Brandon of the WHL. Well, okay, first of all, huge injuries this year, barely played. So, and we watched him last year too. We watched him last year too. I watched him the year prior as well at the U17. So we had at least a good sample of viewings of him coming into this year. So it's not like we never saw him play before this year. So obviously the back injury is a concern. It's always a concern anytime a young athlete has back problems. We saw it with Caden Lidstrom last year. Still see it to this day with Villardi with the Winnipeg Jets. As good as a player he is, the back problems are a bit of a problem. So Roger McQueen, 6'5", really good skater for his size, really good hands in transition, can beat player one-on-one with his hands, with his reach, with his speed. So that's really positive. We love how physical of a player he wants to be on the ice. He's not shy. He will finish his check. And even in a year where he had his back problems, he was still a pretty physical player. So we have to give him credit for that. Where we are different in our opinion of him is that based on some comments that we see online or lists, we have never viewed him as a gifted shooter. Or a gifted scorer. We don't view him as a guy who will score a lot of goals in the NHL. I think one way where he's going to score his goal will be around the net. He's first of all, I mean, he's big, so he's going to be tough to move from the front of the net. He's got the reach. He can get to loose pucks pretty easily with his long reach. So he's going to be able to score goals around the net. He's also doesn't play on the outside, so he's gonna get in there. So he's going to be able to score goals from there, but he's not a big danger to score from distance. We don't really like a shot from far. We just don't see his shooting ability translating to a lot of goals in the NHL. We feel like a lot of his goals will come from 5 feet from the net. That's one thing. So okay, we don't like his shot, but we still think he's going to be able to score, some goals around the net. The main issue we have is the playmaking. Maybe Brad, you can talk about the playmaking for me, but that's been we have gone back a lot about the lack of playmaking by him. Lots of missed pass. Doesn't see the eyes super well. A bit slow at finding his options. Maybe Brad, I'll let you say a few words about this, and you can talk about other stuff as well. But mainly, a big reason why he's not top 5, top 10 for us is the playmaking lacking a bit for us.
Yeah, so the big thing here is when you first lay eyes on him coming into the season, he immediately you're thinking, okay, for sure top 10, probably somewhere between 6 and 9 based off the first handful of games. And the reason we thought that is like, okay, you look at the toolkit, obviously 6'5", skates relatively well for his size, especially in straight lines, pretty darn good in straight lines. Needs a bit of work on his agility, but he's 6'5", he'll get there. But the more you peel back the layers and the less you concentrate on his hands and size and toolkit and skating, the more you concentrate on everything else, like, oh, there's a really raw player here. Like, missing very basic defensive assignments sometimes as a center, not understanding just very basic passing trajectories. His wheelhouse is lagging behind big time. Now, that's an area he can improve for sure. If we look at Kieran Walton, for instance, Kieran Walton had a pretty bad wheelhouse in his draft year, and that was a player we had the highest ranked out of anybody publicly. We thought it was one of the best picks the last season, and turned out to be the right choice so far. So Walton has improved his wheelhouse dramatically in his +1. That means that there is absolutely some potential for McQueen to do the same here, right? We have to take into consideration growth rate. That said, right now it's behind, and more importantly, he operates and tries to use it too much. So that's one thing that we get a bit concerned about when it comes to the sense component. We don't want to see a player who's misidentifying a skill and then overly relying on that skill without getting the validation necessary to continue to use it. So that was very confusing to us. He would operate way too much within his wheelhouse on the power play, for instance, as an example of that. When it comes to his playmaking, I've done head-to-head comparisons because I think it's absolutely the most overrated aspect of this player. Now, he can one-touch pucks, he can generate give-and-go sequences, and he can finish off his catch and release off of those sequences, and he can cycle. He can do all the baseline playmaking. Okay, that's not the issue. What the issue is when you really peel it back and, okay, how high-end can it get? There was not a single pass that he made this season that was over a stick. Not a single one. Everything was to the ice. Everything is flat. There was a lack of technical ability, a lack of nuance when it comes to being able to feather and sauce pucks correctly. I did a head-to-head of him versus Frondell, and Frondell is considered a secondary playmaker. He certainly, his primary skills is shot. Frondell absolutely was a much better playmaker than McQueen, and it's because of the sense of timing and the trajectory and the speed of his passing. It's a much sharper, cleaner, more efficient playmaking style than what McQueen currently brings. So there's a rawness there. Now, if we pull it back even further, you look at his handling. Yes, he's extraordinarily dexterous for his size, and at times he can operate in a phone booth and look like a 5'9" forward when it comes to his handling rates. And that's where he does have something special to him. However, the handling rates, if you actually break down the percentage of his success rates with them, they're actually not very high at all right now. This is all based off projection. It's all based off of what we actually don't see. And that's where I find the challenge with, one, how to rank him, and two, the online discourse. Because a lot of people talk about him as being a top 3 talent. Absolutely, emphatically not. There is no indicator that he's that. That tells me you have not watched him at all. That's just as simple as that. So it's one of those situations where he has tremendous potential, but he's extremely risky when it comes to this injury. I know that he was cleared. And of course, he's going to say, they're all going to say the right things over there, right? From doctors that I know professionally, most of them told me it's an incredibly worrying and concerning injury long-term. It does have the capacity to be a recurring injury. At 6'5", and he's a big kid who throws his weight around, and we love that. And he's assertive, and he's inside driven. He'll get to that. We want all those qualities from him. That's incredibly important for him to translate. But one thing about this kid, he's not very innately gifted at falling out of contact. So, like, for instance, I always use like fighting metaphors and everything, or comparisons. Like in this example of some of you watching Daniel Cormier in MMA, one of the best at rolling with shots. And it's very good at not taking a full shot. James Toney in boxing, one of the best boxers of all time, at slipping and be able to dynamically understand how to roll with a punch. Okay. We pull that to hockey. Some of the best to ever do that. Pavel Datsyuk. Let's bring up Datsyuk again. One of the best ever at understanding leverage advantages relative to his size. McQueen falls way off the top end of that. That's one of my biggest concerns with this player. He doesn't actually know how to fall out of contact. He doesn't understand leverages. And I know for some of you are saying, well, that's something you can learn. To a degree. It's always on a spectrum. It's to a degree. There's a reason that, like, Sambo world champions like Fedor, you watch him get slammed and roll with it. It's a different level. Not everybody can learn that, right? There's an instinct. There's an innateness to it. There's an innateness to weight transfers and how physicality operates when it comes to contact. And that's something McQueen this season has not displayed. So with this injury, on top of that, that's doubly concerning. Then you look at the projection. This is by far the player that requires the most projection of any player we've talked about. Now, obviously, we still like him. We have him top 12 for a reason. There's a lot to like. It's just we think publicly that this player has been a bit overstated and very misunderstood. There's a tremendous amount that needs to improve in order for him to even honestly get to the top 12 like we have him ranked.
Yeah, honestly, I want to add, we just talked about his playmaking. It's been, with the back injury, a lot of people have compared him to Caden Lindstrom, last year, who had, back problems. And obviously he didn't really play this year. So those were valid. But, when people compare both players, I hear sometimes like that McQueen is ahead of Lindstrom. And I'm like, how? Like, skating, Lindstrom is better. Shooting, Lindstrom is better. Playmaking, he's better. Like, people don't want to admit this. I don't know. But people were really. I've heard like some pretty harsh thing about Lindstrom and his playmaking and his hockey sense last year, and I'm like, okay, well, fair, but where is this year with McQueen, or even last year? Like,
It's a good
um,
point. Nobody's brought
so
it up. I don't know
yeah,
why, but nobody brings it up, and it's you're right. It's a huge area of concern.
so I don't. It's not even like a knock on McQueen. It's just I don't know. Sometimes some people in the media don't make any sense when they talk about prospect
The
and
media gets hyperbolic, and honestly, for all of you listening, it makes our job a lot harder because, again, listen, Jerome and myself are not perfect at this. We're gonna. I promise you, some of this list is wrong. We're gonna have to revisit it with all of you. However, we actually watch what we say we do, and we watch more than almost anybody on this earth. I promise you that. So when we take McQueen's passing rates, I mean, we've watched every pass he's made twice, literally twice, because that's how much we want to make sure to explain to all of you the reality of what this player is relative to the hyperbolic nonsense that media loves to spout. Because, to be quite honest with you, I mean, some of them have no idea how to scout, and even worse, some of them pretend to scout when they're
mm,
not. And so, admittedly, that's where we get a little fiery because it makes our life more difficult. Like Caden Lindstrom and McQueen, you all listen to this. A lot of you, I'm sure, could absolutely scout if you had the opportunity to. If we put on 10 of Caden Lindstrom's best performances draft year and put on 10 of McQueen's, you would see the difference very quickly. It was not close. It was
yeah.
not close whatsoever. So it's very bizarre how the media can operate in some ways with some of these players when discussing them.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to number 11 here in the honor ranking, and still in the WHL. Jackson Smith from Tri City Americans, another guy who's going to the NCAA next season. He's going to play for Penn State. Okay, Jackson Smith. I mean, if you look at size skating combo, it's excellent. He's one of the best skater in the whole draft. He's 6'3", 6'4", so that's all good. Um, Athletic ability, I mean, he's top 5 in the draft. You can make a case he's probably higher than top 5. Amazing combo of size and skating, and he's also one of the rare defensemen that has like legit offensive potential in this draft. There's not many of them. As we mentioned before, is offensive skilled defensemen in this draft. There's not many of them. He's one. He does have some flaw, obviously. Sometimes there's a lot of junior in him. He's gonna try too much on the ice. Um, that's gonna cause a bit of a. I mean, there's some risk with that in this game. Sometime under pressure, he's gonna struggle with the puck. But overall, I think we like this player because he's not afraid of trying things on the ice. It was funny watching him this year because he was flashing all of that talent, and he had 2 goals in like 50 games. That was weird to me because if I never saw his stats, I would have never told you he only had 2 goals this season because he creates a lot of play in the old zone. And then he finished with 9 goals in his last 13 games. He's very talented. Just some risk to his game. I think, Brad, you have like one of the best player comp ever for him, and it's not even a defenseman. So I'll give you the floor here. You can talk about Jackson Smith, but I think your player comp for him was pretty bang on for me, and really funny at the same time because it's one is a forward, one is a defenseman, but it was pretty hilarious for me when you mentioned it to me. So I'll give you the time here.
All right, I think he's Adam Fantilli, just defensive version. So there you go. Yeah. So okay, so Fantilli, that style of play, he's not as talented as Fantilli, okay, but he's very talented for a defensive. He's like one of the true own like offensive defensemen of this class in a way, and he does have a very unique quality where he is physical and he has phenomenal transitional rush defense upside. Like he can see cut in the neutral zone like the wind. He can gain on opposing players. His rate of recovery is very good. He can rapidly close his gap when he needs to. So like from that perspective, he's an incredibly unique player. But the way that Fantilli works is that basically you have to give him free reign within the system that you're operating in. You have to let him be an individual within an offensive system and do his own thing some of the time. Not all the time, but some of the time. You want him flying down the wing. You want him attacking individually. He's that gifted. You want him operating through triangles and going off the rush. And like admittedly in his draft year, I had some real issues with just how often he would do this. Like he was just very individual on the ice, which again, this is a Jackson Smith issue. That said, Fantilli's made it work with the system he's in Columbus right now because Evison can actually coach. Like, luckily, he has a very good coach who can actually apply it correctly. And I bring that up because Jackson Smith is going to need that. He needs a coach that's going to be able to apply structure to him to a degree, but then let the chains come off and let him just explode. Use that athleticism in transition and to be successful by just attacking in ways that a lot of defensemen don't usually attack. To Jerome's point, like we were very perplexed by the lack of goals for the most of the year, because when you look at his shot, if you isolate it, mechanically, it's actually very good. Like he had as a good shot. Then you look at his seam identification through traffic, that was also pretty good. It's like, how in the heck can a player this gifted with this seam recognition score so little? But finally it adjusted and he started scoring. And once that happened, then you really start seeing the potential take off, and it's all systems go. Now, there is certainly limitations here. One of the main ones is that he has difficulty basically exploding out of his tunnel vision at the right times when he is puck handling and doing his thing through the neutral zone. There are times where he needs to find a weak side option, but instead, because he's talented, he'll go full Fantilli. He'll be like, I'm going to dissect these 2-3 players in front of me. I'm going to go through this layer traffic, and then I'm going to find an option. When in reality, he should be thinking, okay, incorporate the team now, then I'll be the one who receives in the offensive zone, then I can be the finisher. He doesn't, he's thinking a bit backwards and trying to do too much at the wrong times right now. So it's all about a reining in effect, trying to get him to augment his attack and understanding how to puck move in a way that's going to be more efficient. That said, I thought his retrieval and exit rates improved over the course of the season. I think he was a better playmaker as the year progressed. And again, in a draft where we're dealing with a lot of risk anyways, he's a unicorn. There's not many Jackson Smiths out there. So we've had him higher than this. We put him back a little bit at the end here, Jerome. I hopefully it works for us here long term. We're usually very bullish on massive defensemen that are physical, that do have offense. We're high on Limatov for a reason. We've had Simon Evanson extremely high, who's also had some risk. So it's one of those situations, though, where we feel maybe Smith is slightly more limited offensively than I'd say Evanson in terms of his hockey sense reads and everything, because Evanson, we got that SHL viewing and it held. So I wonder if Jackson Smith, if he was theoretically in a pro league, if that would kind of change our ranking a bit, which it does depending on the player.
I mean, I look at our list and I don't know if he dropped because of anything he did. I think it's mostly about other guys moving up, and other guys we can drop farther than what we put them on our list. So I don't think he did anything wrong. I mean, maybe if there was no hockey sense issue with him or decision making issue with him, he'd be higher. Him and Mrtka was really close all year, and I think we decided to go with Mrtka, that we're going to talk about soon, just because he's a bit more safe than Smith. But definitely Smith could, in 5 years, it could look like, what are you guys doing? Like, Smith is way better than Mrtka. So it could happen. So you want to add anything on Smith, Brad?
Well, the one thing I'll say about like our ranking in general, just for everybody, is like it can be very difficult for us to like, there's a specific range, and you could put them anywhere between 8 and 12, right? And you're not gonna blink an eye at all, because realistically, if we had a team, we would know what the composition of that team is. If we needed a massive offensive defenseman, then we're going to take Smith over the next forward we have ranked here, which is Bear. So it's really team dependent, and because we don't have a team, it can be kind of tricky when it comes to exactly where we put players. But my main point is, don't be too upset or offended if you see a player that might be 2 or 3 spots down relative to what you would expect. It doesn't mean we don't love the player. It just means that we were trying to like present the player to us with risk and trying to take that in consideration on draft day.
I'll say this before we're done with him. I think you mentioned Adam Fantilli as a player comp. Mine was Travis Sinheim at the start of the year. He's probably has a bit more talent than Sinheim, but the same risk also than Sinheim, and both really good skating defenseman with like great size. So I think it was fitting pretty well as well. Anyway, we'll go to our number 10 ranked player, and it's Carter Bear from Everett, one of our favorite players in the whole draft. We had to drop him a few spots because of the injury. You look at guys that were ranked above him, we probably like Carter Bear better, if not from the injuries. And all right, let's talk about him. He was incredible in the first half of the season. First half of a season by any player in this class. He was unstoppable in the first half. It was not only the offense; it was like the off puck game, the tenacity, the compete level. As scout, we often say, "Oh, he's playing like that will be his last shift he ever plays." I mean, Carter Bear plays like this every game. Every shift he plays, it's almost like someone tells him, "Hey, Carter, this is your last shift you'll ever play," and then he goes and he plays like, that will be his last shift ever, and then the next shift he plays like that again. And I joke with Mark, our boss. I said, this Carter Bear and Brady Martin are like the 2 most hockeyprospect.com prospect you could ever find. They play the game the way we want, and they play the game we appreciate it. There's a nice mix of skill and grit, intelligence as well. For Carter Bear, obviously the injury at the end of the year really not good. Not a good news. I'm no doctor, but we have been told that it's not as bad as Peyton Krebs. But again, I'm no doctor. I have not. I don't know anything about it. But I know he's back skating, so he said he's 1 month ahead of his schedule. So that's a good news. If things continue like they are now, he will be ready for next season. The skating for him, like, it's not bad, but it's also not a really strong part of his game. We'll see how the skating is affected by this injury. I think it did affect Peyton Krebs, similar to Carter Bear. Peyton Krebs was not a fantastic skater either in his draft year. So anyway, Carter Bear, he's one of he's probably my favorite player in the whole draft. Not the best, but my favorite player to watch. A bit of a second half of the season, a bit of a dip. He lost his center, Julius Mittinen, a guy we talked about last year. Mittinen got hurt at the U20, so Carter Bear was without his center, and even Everett as a team kind of like adds more up and down in the second half of the season. Stats wise, he really had a big letdown in the second half of the season. When we actually watch him play, he was still, maybe offensively, it was not happening at the same rate in the first half, but he was still bringing like a really solid game, even though offensively he was not as successful as the first half of the season. Dual threat offensively, I would say, Brad. As good as a shooter than a passer. I think people are underrating his playmaking a bit. Really enjoy some of his playmaking plays this year. So he's 10. He would not be 10 if not for that injury. He'd probably be still in the top 8 maybe even like 7-6. Who knows? Brad, I've been talking long enough about Carter Bear, but I'll give you the floor here on Carter Bear or 10th ranked player.
Sure. Well, I'll start off by self-correcting. I talked to a doctor that told me more about Bear's injury in depth, and we did a podcast halfway through the season discussing it, and I said that it would be a shortening of the Achilles that's the major concern long term. I was incorrect. It's the lengthening. Usually, like for instance, bicep tears, you're worried about the point where the tear is basically folding the bicep up, and then it's not elastic anymore, and it loses its shape, and then there's a shortening effect. So I was thinking it from that perspective, and I'm wrong. Apparently it's the lengthening of the Achilles tendon that is the long-term concern, because it takes away power as well. That said, apparently it's like much better and more recoverable injury than McQueen's. So that was surprising to me to hear. I'm not a doctor, but I've talked to real doctors who've told me those things. So Carter Bear, yeah. So let's talk about him without the injury. So to give an idea of just how underrated this player is, he is absolutely, I know I'm going to lose some of you, but it's the truth. He is absolutely a better player than James Hagens right now. It's not even a question. He's a better player than James Hagens. He's a better player than Roger McQueen. He's a better player than basically anybody in this draft right now. Like by the midpoint of this season, he was crushing Porter Martone on a game-to-game basis. It wasn't even a question. Yeah. Not even a question. They weren't in the same realm, right? Now, Porter Martone came to play in the playoffs, and he has a tremendous amount of talent and ability, and there's still a potential growth rate. He's 6'3", et cetera. You have to take that into consideration. But when you're talking pound for pound, game to game, consistency, what they brought, Bear is basically the best in this draft of what he brings. Okay, especially when you look at the first half of the season before he slowed down a bit in the second half of this production. So one thing I've seen publicly is that he's not gifted enough offensively to be considered a top end, top 12, 13, 14 pick. I will counteract that statement immediately. So one thing I did was I did a head-to-head comparison with James Hagens. I did 2 years. I did over 400 shots, every goal they scored, and I think over 40 games of passing plays, plus all their handling rates over the last 2 seasons. It took me over 4 hours, did a direct comparison. What was surprising even to me was that Carter Bear is actually one of the most efficient handlers in this entire class. Okay, let's get out of the way. Like way more efficient than Brady Martin, for instance. Brady Martin attempts to handle the puck more than basically any other prospect in this class, which is somewhat a byproduct of his environment, but also a byproduct of the fact that he looks to experiment constantly and doesn't have nearly as much success as that you typically expect to see. Where Carter Bear doesn't deke as often, but his efficiency rates were through the roof. Like he was in the top 10 percentile in terms of efficiency out of any player that I was looking at with their handling rates in the top 25 of our list. So that was a bit surprising for me. The other extremely surprising aspect of this player is that when you look at his shooting mechanics, they're actually ahead of James Hagens for the most part. The only area that James Hagens has Bear beaten mechanically is through his bottom hand activation, but the initial loading phase of his release actually takes longer than Bear's, and Bear is actually better at shooting in motion right now and off the rush than Hagens. So it's one of those situations. And when I broke down their goals, one thing I should say, they had some almost identical goals. Like everything looked identical. So a lot of people are saying, well, James Hagens, this dynamic, amazing talent, you can't drop him too low. What are you guys doing? And then everybody, or not everybody, but quite a few people publicly are like, Bear's just not talented enough to put up there. When in reality, when you break them down, like play for play, skill for skill, their handling and shot rates are extremely equivalent in some areas. Now, the playmaking, Hagens can be a more technical playmaker, especially with his stretch playmaking, his technical saucer playmaking. Hagens is a step ahead, but Bear is a very underrated playmaker. And to Jerome's point, he's a dual threat. He can slip passes. He can make beautiful. One of the main things about Bear, and he brings actually something similar to Benson that we talked about earlier, Zach Benson, the one-touch processing playmaking is exceptional. He can find the best option way faster than most other prospects. When you factor in the high octane motor on top of that processing, that's why he produces at such a high rate. It's because defenses can't keep up with him when mentally trying to determine the next move he's going to make. So again, that's Eklund as well. Eklund has some of that quality as well. Where with Hagens, he operates a bit differently. Hagens isn't about trying to use a motor. He's more trying to be more of a slick and sleek and technical playmaker at times. We'll get to that very shortly here. But yeah, I just wanted to, the main point is like he is absolutely a top 6 talent. And he's absolutely right now, as of this discussion, better than almost all these other extremely high prospects. He just straight up is. The question is the projection and the injury and where you factor that in. And we ultimately decided on 10. But I mean, this player to me is our Seth Jarvis of this class. We thought Seth Jarvis was top 7-8. We went against basically the entire industry on that, and so far so good on that front. That's the same type of feeling we get when we watch Carter Bear. There's a whole lot of Seth Jarvis. Seth Jarvis is a better skater. Seth Jarvis definitely a better open ice north-south skater, and Jarvis had a curve that went in the right direction. He had a much better second half than the first, so the curve was in the right direction relative to Bears, but there's a tremendous amount of crossover in terms of like how we evaluate this player, how we think he's underrated, and what we think will happen 4 to 5 years from now.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we could say about Bear versus Hagens, like we can compare everything you just mentioned, but we're going to talk about Hagens because he's our 9th ranked player. But there's one thing about Carter Bear: you never need to ask him go to the net. He doesn't need anyone to ask him because Hagens does play a lot on the outside, and that is not Carter Bear's game. Carter Bear's game is in traffic, in front of the net, in the slot. Like he's like inside driven. So that's another reason why I would have a really hard time drafting, James Hagens over Carter Bear, depending on what the injury is for Bear. And the only reason why Carter Bear is number 10 is the injury. All right, we just talk about him quite often in the Carter Bear segment. Our 9th ranked players is James Hagens from Boston College. A lot of people might be scratching their head over that ranking. Well, let us explain a bit. Okay, freshman year at Boston College, not bad, but we were expecting a lot more out of him in his freshman year. I think 36 points that he had. Anyway, I think we were expecting something along closer to 50 points this season. So that's one thing. Mainly, I think it was the lack of play driving that really concerned us about, ranking him as a top 3, top 5 player. We just didn't see much play driving from him. And it was a bit the same issue last year with the program. He was not really driving the play for me enough. That's why watching him last year versus Frondell, I was leaning towards Frondell as the better of the two player. Obviously, Hagens is really talented. He has shown it with his 2 year with the program. And this year at Boston College, it was a bit difficult because he's playing with Ryan Leonard. He's playing with Gabriel Perrault, and it was a um, weird mix between the three of them. Like obviously Perrault and Leonard, they play amazing together, but my feeling was like I felt like Hagens was like, you know, put on the side, and it was mostly like Perrault and Leonard playing together, and it was obviously a big letdown going from Will Smith on that line to Hagens. I felt like Hagens had his best moment during that season when he played with Teddy Stiga on the other line. And they obviously played last year together with the program. Other problems we had with James Hagens, we're not convinced he's going to be a center at the NHL level. He's a undersized player. Not, well, that's something that might be controversial, Brad, but we don't think he's this amazing skater that people are mentioning online. We don't. We look at his skating. We don't think like he has good edge work. He can move east west, but north south it's fine. But for a smaller player, it should be better. He should be more explosive. He's also an older player in this class, so he should be more advanced with his power output. So that's one thing that is a bit concerning for us. And again, everyone is saying he's a fantastic skater. We are completely not there for that. Um, and another thing that concerns us is we talk about the lack of play driving, but also he stays on the outside too much. That's a concern for us. And if you guys have followed hockeyprospect.com over the last decade, you know what players we like. And you have no better example than Carter Bear in this class, Brady Martin. Playoff value guys. We value playoff hockey a lot. Um, so what happens when you stay on the outside in the ozone? Well, you in the playoff you have no impact. That's the concern we have with James Hagens is can he become more of a play driver? Can he go inside? Can he be inside driven? We're not convinced. We think he's going to be a good point producer at the NHL level, but more of a good regular season player. But come playoff time, we're concerned that that's not going to work out for him. Maybe um, in a good scenario for him, he gets more points than the Brady Martin, the Desnoyers, the Carter Bear, but those guys have more playoff value. I think if you watch the Panthers play in the playoff, you'll see why we love guys like Bear and Martin a lot more than Hagens. Again, the Carter Bear rankings is only based on the injury. He would be higher if not from that injury. And also, there's something to be said about we like to see player improve from year to year. I don't know how much James Hagens really improved since last year. Um, so I feel like I'm pretty, I feel I'm pretty down on him. So don't get me wrong, he's still a really talented player. He's got good hands. The playmaking is good. He can score. He's got a good shot. Um, and we think he can be a top six player at the NHL level, probably on the wing. Easily could be a 60 point, 65 point player. Um, but I think we value other players more than him, and that's why he's number 9 on our final rankings. We have been wrong before. Uh, I'll mention Lucas Raymond was a guy who we rank 8 back in 2020, and we do regret it at this point. But I'll say this: Raymond was way more dynamic than Hagens. Also, he was younger in his draft year, so the only thing I can say is we're gonna see in the next a year or two if we're wrong about James Hagens. It reminds me a bit of Shane Wright in his draft year, where he was viewed as the top guy. The difference between Shane Wright and James Hagens, we didn't know who could be number 1 other than Shane Wright in that draft year until the Olympic game, basically where Slavkovsky went crazy, and then he had a great second half after that. This year was pretty clear from the start, like a month and a half into the season that Matthew Schaeffer was going to be that guy. At least for me, I was like, there's no chance Hagens is our number 1 guy after watching Schaeffer. Yeah, I guess that would be my quick take on why James Hagens is number 9 on our list. Still remain a pretty talented player. He could bite us in the ass. That's a possibility. Even though I think he will be a point producer, I still like what the other guys that are ranked above him bring, compared to him. So maybe Brad, you can continue here on our process and our ranking of our rankings of James Hagens.
Okay, sure. So from a process perspective, we're always looking for line drivers at the top end of this class. As Jerome mentioned, the line driving rates were nowhere near where we expected. The question is why? Why? What happened this year? Is a byproduct of too many games? Is a byproduct of over expectations and then not meeting them halfway? And do we launch them off a cliff? And so let's break that down a bit. So the first thing Jerome mentioned was the line mates. So Perreault and Leonard. So one thing I can absolutely definitively state is that Ryan Leonard, for whatever reason, absolutely did not want to pass the puck to this player. I don't know why, but there was very little chemistry. So that was one facet of his game where I tried to give him some leeway because it was very obvious that Leonard had no interest in passing him a puck. And sometimes they had set plays coming out of the draw that it seemed like Hagens was not involved in the set play. So that was also another bizarre situation to monitor. And as a result of that, we had to look at him with other line mates. And sure enough, I thought he was actually slightly more successful. Even with Dean Letourneau, for instance, on his wing, I thought he was more successful from that perspective. The one thing I'll say about this is that we had hesitations with Shane Wright right up to once the midpoint of the year came in that draft 2022, we were realizing that Shane Wright's not what we were expecting. Sometimes what happens is a player gets way too much hype relative to his talent level. But in this situation, it was interesting because if you go back and watch him in his best performances, peak performances against like Dubuque, for instance, that our scouts in the USHL got us to watch, Chris got us to watch against Dubuque, and he had a dominant performance. So he was incredibly dominant. What was interesting was it's all skill-based. So when Hagens can operate and be, quote unquote, the player on his team and line, and then is allowed an environment to take over with his talent. In the USHL, they couldn't stop it. The defenses weren't good enough. However, we never got to see what would happen when a defense could stop him, when a defense could actually overwhelm him physically and keep him to the outside. We never saw or had to have seen what James Hagens is as an adapter until this season. So going into the year, based off of talent, based off of previous success, based off of dominant U18s, even though admittedly we don't weight as heavily because Russia and Belarus weren't there, we really thought he could be a high-end player. Aatu Räty was a player that was considered a top 2-3 pick coming into the season. I remember Jerome told me early, I don't see it. Doesn't even look top 5 to me. I'm like, okay, let's monitor that. We can't watch him in the league early and realize very quickly that there's a skating deficiency that's going to keep him from ever looking like what people thought, right? You just don't know until it's the draft year, and you got to give him some benefit of the doubt. And admittedly, sometimes we do a bit of loose scouting when it comes to the -1s because we're so focused on the class that's in front of us, right? So with Räty, we realized, this is just simply not the player people expected. With Shane Wright, it was like, okay, this is still a gifted player, but he has a lot of issues. And one of those issues is the exact same issue that Hagens has. So let's break down the perimeter play and the lack of driving instinct. So I know for a lot of you listening to this, you're like, come on, it's his freshman season. He's underdeveloped physically. He's going to get driven to the outside. You have to expect that. As you guys already stated, Lucas Raymond was driven to the outside in the SHL. Now look at him, right? So a couple counterpoints. One, he was outside against the U20s, the U20 junior in the World Junior Championships. He was still perimeter for the most part. Two is that when you look at his frame and everything, it doesn't project to actually put on that much more size. This isn't a broad player that has 20 to 30 pounds to fill out. He's already somewhat built and he's got somewhat of a narrow frame. So it's one of those situations where when we look at the growth rate potential, we think it's actually reduced, especially when you consider the age. And then this is the huge one for us. I think publicly, again, there's certain attributes that seem to be misunderstood more than others. Skating is absolutely at the top of that list. If this player skated like Cullen Potter, we wouldn't be discussing number 9. Okay, he would not be number 9 on this list. He would still be top 3 or 4. Okay, because the skating would allow him to offset all the deficiencies we've seen this season. So what are those deficiencies? He is completely unadapted to his environment when he cannot find a passing option. He does not incorporate speed differentials to the degree you would think he should. When it comes to how he skates, his linear crossover mechanics are very good. His 3-step area quickness, his acceleration is very good, but his open ice peak power output is actually not very good right now. So will it go up another level? For sure it will. But how he offsets the defense with that skating, we didn't see any sort of improvement, even though he was continuously kept to the outside. So then we're looking at the handling rates. Like, okay, what are his the hands are soft, obviously. He's got a deft puck touch. He's a phenomenal set of hands. But how he was using them was a much more pressing indicator of how perimeter he truly is. So when you look at the most of his moves that he tries to do, he does 2-touch windmill dekes from the inside back to the outside around an opposing player. He does a lateral 2-touch drag transfer, which allows him to set up for trailing options directly behind him. When he's elongating the stick, right, it allows him to be able to pull it back, and that's where he gets that trailing option too. And then he does an inside deke between his own legs, where he's going from the inside back to the outside as well. And he usually incorporates that deke so he can end up on his forehand again. Now, and then the last deke I'll mention is it does a lot of slip triangle dekes, and even those are from inside to the outside. So we went over 4 bases of his deking habits and how he exploits defenses. All 4 end up with the end phase of his dekes being on the perimeter. Now, the reason that he sets up on the perimeter is because it gives him a better opportunity to set up for his trailing options. He can defer back to the point. He can defer to trailing options in transition. He can also hook passes around triangles after that end phase when he's finishing his deke, because the defense theoretically has to pivot and rotate depending on their positioning. So it does give him some advantages. It does. But it also makes sure he's never actually on the inside of the ice. So that is an enormous issue. And it is absolutely something that occurred at the U20 level, not just in college. And it's something that when I went back to watch him in the USHL last season was also present. So that's a huge area of concern. Now you look at the next aspect of the player. If you look at him from a shooting perspective, he's mechanically actually more limited than we expected him to be. There is a lagging phase within his release point when it comes to his wrist shot and his slap shot. He is not a power play weapon right now, and that shows in their power play production. They did not have a good power play on that team. Now, you could say, well, theoretically, he's going to get better on the power play. Maybe his one-timer develops or his catch and release develops, and then he's looking at 40, 50 points next season in college, looks way better. That is absolutely a possibility. But if this season, he's more of a single threat than a dual threat at the level that we expected. I did a podcast where we did that together, where midseason we broke down the shot in depth. And one of the reasons we thought he was having so much difficulty is because of where he attempts to shoot. And again, this goes back to being on the outside too often. He is not inside driven to nearly to the point you would want. And he does not use his rapid handling like Carter Bear, like Brady Martin, to create 2-3 touch deke scenarios where he's cutting through the hands of opposing defenses while being able to just protect the puck on his backhand, for instance. He doesn't do any of that. So that's an enormous concern. And then really the other things I'll say is that Jerome mentioned being on the wing to center. This player is not very good innately at understanding off-puck play. This is not a Carter Bear off the puck or like even how Michael Misa strips, like Michael Misa has defensive issues, but even how Misa strips puck on the back check, gets under sticks, uses his leverage. He can strip players way higher rate than Hagens can. And that's not even a very good defensive center at this time, right? So it's one of those situations where even in like very critical games, he didn't defend at the rate you would expect. There was basic positional switches he would miss in like the gold medal game against Finland. He missed basic positional switches in that game. That you can't do that in a gold medal game. You have to be on top of players. Now, the defense is there to a degree, but the urgency, the understanding of why he has to do it isn't there. So like one of the reasons that Celebrini is so special is because the kid thinks the game like Patrice Bergeron or Sidney Crosby. He thinks the game in terms of the game being actually 200 feet and him having to understand how to dominate in that 200 feet. Where with Hagens, you can tell the way he plays, he does not think that way. He's thinking about transitional attack. That's what he's thinking about. He's thinking about how to set up his teammates, and he largely does it on the perimeter, and it's through the transitional attack. So those are some of the major areas we have concerns. The other I would state is that we'll break this down very simply. He absolutely did not look like a franchise player this season.
No.
At all. I thought he played a privileged game. To me, he looks like a player who's expected to be anointed and destined for great things without actually putting the work in to do those great things, because that's the way he played on the ice this season. Again, can part of that be the fact that he was the number 3 on his line, and that for the first time in his career, he had to defer to teammates who were just as talented as him and more mature and developed than him? Maybe. But if you looked at him in other games where they weren't his primary line mates, he still had difficulty at times. So it's one of those situations where we knew pretty quickly that this player wasn't what we were expecting. Then you have to slow burn him, give him some benefit of the doubt. Then we're getting feedback. NHL staff were agreeing with this entirely. I mean, how many quotes are in our book, Jerome?
I just count.
Yeah, how many?
I mean, some of the quotes are, my quotes, your quote, Mark's quote, but total, I've never seen a player have that many quotes. It's 45 quotes.
45. So that's the most ever. That's our record right there for the book. So, what's interesting, so we don't read those quotes until the book is out. We don't see the NHL quotes until the book is out. And believe me, sometimes we see things differently than a lot of NHL staff. There's an NHL staff quote on Kurban Limatov saying he can't skate. I think it's one of his strengths, right? It happens. But with this player, it was very interesting. A lot of quotes aligned with us. So this is not just us trying to look a certain way. It's more the industry knew that this player wasn't as gifted and was more flawed than expected. And then, unfortunately, what happens is I'm going back to attack media here. Media doesn't watch or doesn't know how to watch or doesn't know what they're looking at. And then there's this media craze over a player that has name recognition. And then everybody has this expectation as a result of that. And rightfully so. A lot of you don't get an opportunity to see these players. You're just getting to listen or see lists or see what people have to say. And they're incorrect. They just don't watch enough or don't understand how to see some of the deficiencies in some of these players. So for instance, one thing that really bothers me with this player, Jerome, publicly, everybody talks about how he's this brilliant playmaker. So I was like, I'll put that to the test. I watched 35 games of his passing sample in a row, 35 games straight. And I did the head-to-head with Bear at another time too. And in that 35 game passing sample, for 15 straight games, he was incredibly underwhelming. Blind plays to nobody. Hope passes constantly. Not understanding how to survey the ice and be patient enough and be calculated enough if the defense could stay with him. And that was another massive issue that was brought up in the book. A lot of NHL scouts talked about how plays die on his stick. And that's absolutely true. And if that's the case, that means there's a lack of adaptability once people can match his skill with some will. And that's so when you see skill suppression, for instance, that's where the secondary characteristics of a player and the psychological makeup of the player have to make up the lost ground. So Brady Martin, for instance, is not as talented as James Hagens. He's not. But James Hagens is going to be suppressed more often, we believe, than Brady Martin, as long as Brady Martin gets the toolkit going, because Brady Martin thinks the game in a way where he will not be denied, where James Hagens does not think like that. When James Hagens denied, he has not shown any adaptation or seeming will to do more. Now, I will give him this. He had a huge rebound goal at the gold medal game in the U20s, but that was the only time we saw a net front rebound goal like that, I believe, over the course of the whole season. We need way more than 1 or 2 games where he's showcasing that. So these are some of the reasons I'm with Jerome. I think he's a winger. I do think he's a 70-point player, which is why he's in our top 10. He's still an extremely talented player. Okay, he's slick, he's sleek, he does have exceptional hands. He can pass a puck when he's not relying on hope passing plays and forcing options. He can be very dynamic. Okay, and I think the shot will come. I do think he'll score more than what we've seen in college this season. And his skating gear could go up another level in open ice, which would really help him and offset some of these issues. But right now, we got to base it off what we're seeing and then trying to project it around with everything else that we have here. And we just think some of these players that we have ahead are much more likely to be either drivers or franchise players that can help impact your team in the playoff game relative to where James Hagens is right now.
Yeah, I'll just add then we'll move to number 8 here. Lots of turnover with him on the ice. He turns the puck over a lot, and then the those 50-50 battles, he doesn't win enough. So that's, to me, another concern with him going forward. But like you said, I think he's gonna be like a good top 6 forward. More on the wing, I think. I have a hard time seeing him play center at the NHL level. So more of a winger, and not a play driver, but one that with his skill level can really help your top 6, help your power play. down the road. But I'm actually looking forward to see what happens at the draft with him, but like what type of season he has uh, next season. Because I remember, let's go back to Shane Wright. We were like, man, what happens if Shane Wright's turn the switch on us? He's gonna make us look bad. Then the year after, Shane Wright did not turn the switch. He was not good at all in the OHL. So I'm curious to see which direction James Hagens is going to take. His second season at Boston College. Is he going to turn that switch, or he's just going to be similar to what he was this year? So all right, so let's move on to our number 8 ranked player, Radim Mrtka, out of Seattle. Big 6 foot, almost 6'6" defenseman. We mentioned Jackson Smith a bit before. Those two were really close for us this year. I mean, Smith is ranked 11, Mrtka 8, but it was really close. I think defense will be his bread and butter at the NHL level. I think we love him because he's really safe. I think offensively, he's going to probably be a 25, 30-point guy. Maybe a bit more. So, some people think he's a bit underrated offensively. I think his hands are definitely underrated. And he's a pretty smart player. I just don't think he's going to be like this, power play guy. And if you're not a power play guy, it's a bit hard to get points on the board. I think he could be a PP2 though. But I really think he's gonna be one of those giant shutdown defensemen that can play against top line. You could pair him with a smaller puck moving defenseman on your team. I think playoff value will be a real thing for him. I think he defends really well. He covers like so much ice with his skating, his reach. He plays with a very long stick, good active stick. There's a lot to like about his defensive game. It's tough to beat one-on-one. I saw some really good battles between him and Carter Barrett this year. Like both when there's some really good one-on-one battles between those two in the WHL. There's a lot to like with this player. If you like playoff hockey, you should enjoy Radim Mrtka. The I say playoff hockey, but it's mostly about how he defends, how much how many minutes he can play. He's gonna play a lot. The my only I guess downside about him is I wish he was a bit more physical, a bit more mean. That's maybe the only thing I don't like about this player. Like if he was a mean, tough, physical defenseman to play against, like he could be higher than 8 basically on our list. That's a bit of my take on Radim Mrtka. We saw him. We started the year at the Olinka. I thought he was so good at the Olinka. Went back to Czechia, and it was a bit difficult for him in the Czechia league. Not much ice time, and when he did, it was a bit like he was maybe afraid of making a mistake. That's usually that usually happens for a young player playing in a men's league. They don't get a lot of ice time, and when they do, they don't want to screw up basically, because if they screw up, that ice time is gone. So best decision he made was coming over to Seattle, playing in WHL, similar to Max Psenica for Portland. Both guys did a really good decision coming over. WHL was the perfect league for them. I would say I'd be very surprised if he's not the second defenseman chosen in this draft after Schaeffer. I'd be surprised. I mean I like Smith, but I feel like NHL team will probably value Mrtka a bit more. But based on what we saw last year at the draft, maybe I should stop making prediction how NHL team are drafting defensemen because We didn't see what happens with the defenseman in last year's draft. We didn't see that one coming with, Dickinson dropping, Bium dropping. We didn't see that coming, and Yakinchuk going before those two guys. Again, we didn't see that one coming as well. So, Brad, maybe a few words on Radim Mrtka.
Sure. So he's raw. This is one of those players that a bit like McQueen in the sense that like you're talking about projection still a lot further out than some of these other kids. So one thing that we do as a rule is that when you look at a kid who's 6'6", 220, and there's like so much potential still in terms of his physical growth rate, you look at his coordination, you look at his nerve signaling, like what type of athlete is he? And then you treat it at his -1 season. Because you really can't treat a draft year for a 5'11" fully developed player like you can for a 6'6" raw talent. They're just complete. So this Kieran Walton, for instance, one of the reasons we got it, what we think is right, and we had him higher, is because we treated it as a -1 season. With Elmer Soderblom, okay, we knocked him back too far, way too far. And the reason why is because we didn't do that. We were like, okay, he's 6'8", but he's not very good. He's under 0.5 points per game in J20. No player ever who's 0.5 points per game out of J20 plays in the NHL full time. What are we doing here? But that's when we learned it was like, okay, hang on though. Like, what if we treated that as his -1 season because he needs way more time just to get caught up to where these kids are now? What would that look like? Would that look different? And would we approach that differently? So from a philosophical perspective, how to draft, how to assess, we changed course there. And so where we differ with Radim Mrtka relative to what you see publicly in some circles is that, yes, we see some mistakes. He can be prone to having his gap malfunction and getting walked. And he can be prone to turning over the puck occasionally on his exits and overhandling pucks and not seeing the ice at the level you would typically like sometimes. And again, he can make mistakes. However, if you look at his curve, you look what he did in the WHL after coming over to Czechia and the adaptation, and then you factor in the fact that we treat this as a -1 season, now it really makes sense as why we have him this high. Like, he will look so different than what we see currently when he's 23. It will be unbelievable the amount of ice he will eat and in the amount of time he can eat it. All right. Like that's one of the defining qualities of this player. It's an incredibly rare quality. I think growth rate for large players is one of the most misunderstood aspects of the sport. It's something I'm looking to try to like explain in more detail and better in the school I'm developing. And it's just one of those situations where like the handling rates will improve. His ability to quarterback a power play is going to go up exponentially past what we've seen. It's just, if we showed you tape of Tage Thompson at this age and Elmer Soderblom at this age, and even shorter players who are 6'5", 6'6", like if we showed you Dmitry Voronkov at 17, you guys wouldn't even believe the difference. It's night and day. It's incredibly difficult to actually try to like track that projection correctly and get it. But this -1 rule that we've set in has been extremely positive so far for us the last couple of seasons, and that's where we're hoping to apply it here with Mrtka. The other factor I'll say is that like, when you look at his skill set, like we're now in unicorn territory. Where this draft, there's a couple of unicorns in this class. This is probably the safest one, I would say, Jerome. This is the safest unicorn bet out of the top end players, and that's another reason we have them that high, because we really do evaluate unicorns a bit differently. We really give them a higher value, because it's just when you get very unique specialization, as some of you know, it really changes the dynamic of your team permanently. Buffalo fans, you know what Tage Thompson does at center. It's so different. It just is such a different look. If you look at Elmer Soderblom on the third line in Detroit, their season was turned around when he was called back up. That's how useful he can be, right? It's a complete. Dmitry Voronkov was amazing in Columbus this season for the most part. Amazing. You don't realize their value until you have them in your systems. That's why some teams go right after unicorns and throw away. Like, yes, Victor Eklund looks great. Carter Bear looks fantastic, but they're easier evaluations and they're easier projections, and they're not as unicorn-esque, right? And that's where there's some give and take when it comes to trying to evaluate and figure out exactly where we should try to put a player.
All right, let's move on to our 7th ranked player, and we go to the Q with Caleb Desnoyers of the Moncton Wildcats, Q champion. Well, let's start there with Desnoyers. the guy has won at every level. He won at the midget level, U17 level, U18, Elenka, now the Q. Basically, the only time he didn't win was the Mem Cup, where London won the Mem Cup. Anyway, he's a smart two-way center, good playmaking, very good attention to details in all three zones. Dream player for any coach to have on their team. Will play. So this year he started the year at center, but he hurt his wrist, I believe, at the Alinka, and so at some point they put him on the wing, full time for pretty much the rest of the season. He was still very successful in the first face-off circle. When he took face-off, he was like well over 60% in the face-off circle. So we do project him as a center, but he played a lot of the season on the wing. He was playoff MVP in the playoff for the Wildcats. I would say we had some difficulty ranking him this year because yes, he's a smart two-way center with like good attention to details, can play really solid defensively, but offensively he was just not a very dynamic player for us. You look at the way he shoots the puck. It's if you compare to any other player in the top 10, he's probably has the weakest shot of any player in the top 10. You look at his puck skills; they're fine, and I would say improve in the second half of the season. Although, like, does that injury had any effect on his one-on-one skills this season? Maybe. That's something we don't know. The talent offensively was not dynamic enough for us to be really bullish on ranking him. I feel like 7 was probably the highest we could go. And if Carter Bear is not injured, Carter Bear is probably 7 on that list. We like this player, but not to the extent that some other people like him. Like I've seen people saying he's a number 1 center in the NHL, and we just don't see it. We see a 55-point second line center that is good two-way. He's going to make everyone better around him, but we don't. I and Brad can add to this. I don't see a guy that's going to become an 80, 90-point guy at the NHL level. Nick Suzuki is that. If you compare like Suzuki's skill level to Desnoyers, like it's not the same thing for me. Like it's a different. We're not talking about the same thing here. Desnoyers did improve his skating this year, so I'll give him that. The pace could be a bit better sometime. I feel like, I think Brad. I remember you sending me like a message at some point. You went and watched Desnoyers a lot, and then versus Eklund, and Eklund was, just pace wise, so much better than Desnoyers. So tricky player who has a lot of hype going for him in the media. We like him, but not as much as other people. Brad, I'll give you the floor here.
No, sure. So, Desnoyers. So the first thing I'll state is that, and I'm sure some of you know this, and some of you are going to nod your head in agreement here. There are scouting contagions that get planted in this industry. Okay, Jack Ivankovic, because unfortunately, and it's no fault of him. I hope the kid nothing but success, but he is a byproduct of the scouting contagion. So you get people don't really know what they're talking about, but they're in a prominent public sphere, and then they hype a player, and then that gets trickled through the industry and then brought up by other people that don't really understand what they're talking about, etc. Right? So it happens in all sorts of industries, not just hockey. But this is that player for me in terms of offensive ability, in terms of like forwards in this draft. So Desnoyers is a great player. He's an awesome kid, great player, 200-foot player, plays the right way, plays hard, physicality, has secondary, third components to his game when he's not producing, and it's all there. However, the scouting contagion component is that I think what happens is some teams that aren't going to be drafting that high suggest, hey, this kid might be the next Nico Hischier. This kid might be the best center in the draft long term. If you look at his growth rate, this kid, and then they make sure that the team that is drafted ahead of them takes him in front, knowing full well that he's a bit more limited than people think. And that's the case we think here. So when it comes to projection, Jerome, we've talked about this. We think more of him as like a 47 to 52 point type of player on average, with peaks around 60, maybe high end 65 points a year. Like, we're not talking point per game like Hischier. Never really displayed that level of talent to me. But he's a good player. So a couple things about it. One thing Jerome mentioned was the shooting mechanics. So this is for sure the least talented shooter out of the top 7 we're talking about today. And the reason why is that mechanically, he has a lot of difficulty being able to actually release his shot while setting an angular adjustment. So he can't rock the puck back and simultaneously use a wrist shot out of the rock back. He can't use a lateral drag and then turn that into like an Austin Matthews style snapshot, for instance. So the way that he shoots, it's fascinating because he shoots like he knows he's not very good at shooting. And in a sense, I appreciate that. So it's one of our, a friend of ours, Simon St. Laurent, he has a video breakdown on his channel discussing this, and it's absolutely correct. He calls it parallel shooting. And that's exactly what he does. So instead of attempting to like dynamically use his hands and then at the end phase of his hands, use his shot and then make an angular adjustment around a triangle, he will set up parallel to the boards and then try to change his shooting trajectory by using his hip line to explode through the shot instead. So it allows him to generate more force and velocity, but it doesn't actually change the shooting angle that often. He's also extremely good at actually using his hands and skating ability in combination to cut around players and get inside driven. However, his success isn't that good because he uses his snapshot so often as a result of not being able to use the wrist shot correctly. So that makes him more inaccurate. Usually players that snap the puck, with the exception of like Phil Kessel's of the world, they're usually a more inaccurate type of shooter. And that's the case with Desnoyers. When he's in tight, he misses more than you would expect him to. He does have a solid shot on the power play. Like, if he has time to set his shot, he's successful, but it's just that he needs space. And he's not going to be gifted that space at even strength, especially when you factor in that he's not the most dynamic skater. He's a solid one, not the most dynamic. And then his handling rates, what Jerome alluded to. So one of the very interesting things is the wrist injury plus the fact that the curve was in the right direction. He did improve his handling rates quite a bit in the second half when I broke them down and isolated them. So that made me more impressed with him long term and got me more on board with this idea of the top 10 of them. But like, when you look at the package, it's really, I think, if you see a team draft him very high, it's actually not more the production that you're drafting. It's the locker room presence. It's the leadership components. It's the charisma that the kid exudes that you want to have bleed through your team. I think that that's a missing component for some of these teams. I did talk to one development coach about his team, and he told me, Brad, our locker room's quiet. Like, a lot of our star players, they're quiet. We need somebody with noise, somebody louder that can help take over a room when things aren't going right. That's the type of player Caleb Desnoyers is. That's where he gets very interesting. But talks of him being top 2 and everything, like, he's going to be great. He's going to play. But like, when it comes to overall talent, like, he's way under, and I mean way under, O'Brien and Frondell and Misa and Martone, and even Hagens has more talent. So it's one of those situations where it gets a bit tricky in trying to determine him to be a true top 3-4 player in this draft class, and that's why we moved him back a bit.
All right, let's move on to number 6, Porter Martone from Brampton of the OHL. That's going to be maybe a long one, this one.
Some of them.
Yeah. Okay, he's number 6, so we definitely really like this player, but he drove us crazy this year because obviously the media was hyping him to, is he the third Ketchuk brother? Is he the next Corey Perry? And then, when we watch him in the regular season, we saw the exact opposite of that. We didn't see any of like the third Ketchuk brother or the next Corey Perry. In fact, I thought he was at times he was pretty lazy this year with with his team. A lot of time he just stopped moving his feet, stopped moving his feet on the back check. Like the physicality was there sometimes was not there at all. To me, he looked like a guy who didn't want to be in the OHL this year. Just a gut feeling from watching him, but when he had to be better in bigger games, he was. Like in the OHL playoff, like with Team Canada at the end of the season overseas. I think he's a player who pretty much, at least for us, saved his season with how he played in the OHL playoff, where he actually looked more like Corey Perry than he ever did before for me. Because I never seen um, those comparable. Just didn't make any sense to me from what I saw in the season. Even last year, I didn't see. I saw a really good player last year. If I'm basing myself on the U18, I saw like quite a good player, but I didn't see a Ketchuk slash Corey Perry. I just didn't see it. So a lot of it is media creation. Again, like we have talked about this quite often. But I'll say this: like the way he played in the OHL playoff was like, oh, I kind of see it now. But it's like I just watched 6 months of his regular season where he didn't really show it to me. And then, he has like a 2 week span in the OHL playoff where he actually shows it. So those are the tougher, those are the tougher decision ranking wise to do. And because honestly, based on this season, I don't think he's ranked where he is. He might not even be top 10 based on his regular season. So obviously the playoff completely changed everything. But there's still some risk. What is the real Martone here? Is it the guy we saw all year? Being very not really committed on the ice. Or is he the guy in the playoff where he was, high compete, borderline dirty, uh, and obviously we love the talent. So we think he's a really good playmaker. He's got good hands, a good shot. He knows how to score goals. He makes player around him better. All that combined, it's a really good package for a prospect. But it was kind of like getting getting on our nerves watching him during the regular season because he was not putting everything together, and by that I mean he did show like really strong a strong skill level during the season, but the compete was not often there, so that was a problem for us. Thank God he played in the playoff, so that does help us, but there's a risk. Like, what are we getting next year out of him? And we could argue like where is he playing next year? He's obviously not NHL ready, um, because the skating, the pace sometimes is lacking. So is he going back to do a OHL, or is he going college for 1 year? That's a few questions that will need to be answered in the next few weeks or months. So yeah, he drove us crazy this year. We like the talent, but there was a lot of missing element in his. The work ethic mostly was. It drove us a bit crazy this year. Brad, I'll give you the floor here to talk about Porter Martone.
Okay, so one of the older players in the draft and one of the more limited skaters out of the top end players. He is slightly knock-kneed. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Elias Pettersson's knock-knee. I would say it's the severity similar, which means it's not that bad. It will self-correct to a degree once he gets bigger and stronger over the course of his career. That said, with the limiting skating, you have to then look at more of his handling and playmaking rates, and that's where he comes out ahead of a lot of people in the first round. A lot of players in the first round. So the playmaking can be spectacular at times. He's a better playmaker than James Hagens for my money. For instance, I really think he's a better playmaker than Hagens. The handling rates, again, he's an interesting one because he can make some spectacular highlight reel handling plays, but he's also pretty sporadic with his hands, a bit like McQueen. So like you project them to be very good, but right now they're a bit more raw than people might expect, depending on the game that you get. Though they did improve too during his playoff run. I thought when he was more dialed in, his handling rates went up, and that's not unexpected either. He's a natural dual threat, one of the top dual threats in this class, which is why he's in our top 6. To Jerome's point, like off-puck game was lacking, and that really mattered for him because his rate of recovery isn't very good because of his knock-knee syndrome and his rate of recovery being like when he has to turn, his turns aren't tight. Right. And then when it comes to launching off his center line, not very explosive. So when he was losing a step, he was really getting drowned out at times behind the play. So that was interesting to take into consideration. But then when the playoffs started, that started to turn around. That's when we really started to get much more on board with this 200-foot player that was starting to emerge and take over games at a high rate. He has fantastic seam recognition on goalies. So, for instance, if goalie is not correctly integrated into his post and RVH position at the right time, Martone can pick that up and just pick the top corner on him or pick the spot that's open on the short side. Very good at understanding how to use his catch and release to mask his release point because he has a lot of range, and he likes to use a lot of drags, a lot of extension type of handling plays. So that can make it very difficult for goalies to pick up the actual angle of his shot because, again, there's significant range there. The huge thing is, like, to Jerome's point, like, I don't know how these media creations get started. Like, he is nothing like the Tkachuks. I have no concept of how that was formed. We were told last season he was more like that. Didn't pay as much attention to him last year, obviously. But, like, the Tkachuks are, like, very dirty, inside-driven, drive other players crazy type of, and he's not that. Like he's not a super pest, and he's like in the playoffs he was tenacious for sure, and he was finishing his checks, and he had no problem getting to the dirty areas and taking contact. But there's a totally different level to like pairing the Tkachuks to me relative to what we've seen with Martone so far when it comes to that aspect of his game. But there's only so far you can drop him, even though he had a poor regular season, right? Like that's the thing is you project the upside, it's still tremendous. He's still like this. We are now finally hit the point per game rate of a player. I think this is the first player on our list where you could distinctly say he should have some 75 to 80 plus point seasons, I think, to give you the idea of the talent level. Then he's 6'3". That doesn't hurt. We'll take that. Mm-hmm. And then if the skating can come, he's going to be a top line player.
It's going to be interesting to see, where he goes in the draft, and which team does take him, and like what's their plan with him going forward. I think the last thing he wants to do is go back in the OHL. He looked a bit disinterested this year in the OHL.
It was just 3, right, Jerome? Was it +3 season? Like he's played 3 years in the O, right?
Yeah.
So that's going to do it. That's probably one of the reasons.
I mean, he will have to play in the NHL, or you just go college for 1 year. So we'll see. I mean, we say he had a bad year, and he finished the year with 98 points. So
he did dip in the second half, though. That's something we could have the both of them dipped big time in the second half. Yeah. That is something to bring up with him.
But I mean, my point is like you can still have like a bad season and still have 98 points because if you're talented, you're gonna have bad games and you're still gonna have 3 points. So it's easy to get points in junior. So people sometimes get carried away with points, and it's like you can have all the points you want, but that doesn't mean you're playing that well. All right. We are now in the top 5. So our number 5th ranked player is Jake O'Brien from Brentford in the OHL. Well, we really like this player, obviously. The playmaking is elite. There's not many players in this year's draft where you can see they have an elite skill. He does. He sees things on the ice that few player can see. Obviously, he's amazing on the power play. I believe he led the OHL in points on the power play. Um, I mean, his team had a killer of a first unit on the power play with Nick Lardis scoring 60 plus goals this season.
70
70,
plus.
yeah, sorry.
Crazy.
Yeah. So, and Vanaker was there too, but O'Brien was the playmaker. He was the vision guy on that power play unit, and they were really successful. Um, slight critique, I would say. We wish maybe the 5-on-5 play was a bit better, but it's not too critical for us. But just we want to mention that we wish maybe the 5-on-5 play could have been a tad better. But I feel like Brantford, their team was really based on power play. So I felt like a lot of time they were actually waiting to get their power play to start creating some offense. And it showed a bit in the playoff. They got caught in the playoff. Lillard just got hurt, and there was a bit more struggle 5-on-5, and the power play was not as good without Lardis, obviously. One thing about O'Brien, he's still weak physically. So he's about 6'2", 177. Um, that's one thing about him. We want to see him get physically stronger. Again, he could be a guy that take full advantage of going play college hockey. I think at the combine he said he was not sure if he was coming back in the OHL. So I think he would be a guy that we really need to hit the gym and get physically stronger, because that's a bit the some of the weaker part of his game. Obviously we mentioned the playmaking, but it's not just in the O zone. Like, his playmaking has value in all three zones. It's not just the actual pass, it's the quickness of the decision that is really impressive with him. In the O zone, he's often playing on the left side of the ice, so he's on his off wing basically, and that's where he creates a lot of his magic on the power play. He has improved his shot, and he's got really good hands. Pretty complete player. I feel also his game his play away from the puck has really got better this year. I think that also helps us feel a lot more confident about him, not being a boss or anything like that. I mean, that's a bit of a rich word here, but the better his play away from the puck was, I think with that it does made it easier for us to move him up on our list. Obviously, we know offensively he can do some damage, but when you have also a plan B and your skill set, that does help. I would say, as far as like hockey sense and smart, of all the players in this draft, he's right at the top. I think he's somewhat underrated in this class. I think, like, people talk often about Desnoyers, and I'm like, why are we not talking about O'Brien? Like, I feel like O'Brien can be project much better for the NHL. Like, I think I don't think there's many guys in this class that are going to be clear cut first line player. I think this kid has a chance. If physically he does get physically stronger, I think he does have a chance to be a top line player. And I don't think a guy like Desnoyers will be a number one line player. But I do think O'Brien has a chance to be a number one player down the road. Brad, what's your take on Jake O'Brien?
I'm with you. I think he's the most underrated player in the draft, or for sure one of them at the top end, the most underrated, I would say. Done direct comparisons between him and Hagens and Desnoyers, and he destroyed them. It wasn't It was over. Like,
Hmm.
and Desnoyers was great. Like, he was great in the playoffs. I did the head-to-head of their playoffs. O'Brien crushed him. And then I did passing rates, obviously, of Hagens we talked about, and did it versus O'Brien. O'Brien destroyed him. They weren't even debatable. So it's just, it comes down to actually contrasting players and watching enough, I think, to get that read. But it's one of those situations where everybody talks about Desnoyers' growth rate and what's there. Like, O'Brien is, I think, broader than Desnoyers, and he's the same height and the same weight. So what? Why are we not talking about O'Brien's growth rate like we are Desnoyers'? One of the biggest differences between the two of them is that they're both primary playmakers, but the way that O'Brien sets up his passing plays is a lot more intricate. So, like, one thing with Desnoyers, he's a very smart player, but there's specialists, and then there's intelligent. Desnoyers is an intelligent player. He's not a specialized playmaker. He's just a very good one. Where O'Brien, he can make sophisticated lateral passing plays that Desnoyers just simply can't make. It just can't make them. Desnoyers sometimes defaults with his playmaking. O'Brien does as well. That's something they have similar. However, I think that O'Brien's shot is coming along. Like, a lot of people think it's really behind. I thought he was starting to really get going by the end of the year mechanically. He was showing us much softer in catch release than he was earlier in the season. And that really matters because the amount of times he's going to be able to set up for give and go sequences is endless. Like, his playmaking is just so sophisticated. But the real thing with this player is the base of his skating. How much better can his skating get if he can pull a Kent Johnson? Kent Johnson was lanky. Kent Johnson wasn't a very gifted skater. Kent Johnson's off-puck game was non-existent, wasn't very good defensively. O'Brien's already ahead of him defensively, but they're very similar in terms of skating trajectory and in terms of their gear and their power at the same age, I find. Kent Johnson is literally twice the skater he was now. Like, he can fly down a wing, and it changes the entire concept of how he generates offense. If O'Brien can get to that level, then there is no chance that he is not even higher than where we have him in a redraft. You could make arguments to take Desnoyers ahead of him. Okay. The problem I have is I really think O'Brien is twice the talent. It's just, there's too much of a talent discrepancy for me. And to be honest with you, is one thing on our staff we were debating too with Martin, because O'Brien's a lot more talented than Martin. He just is. He's a much more talented playmaker and handler than Martin is. So it made it difficult to try to figure out exactly where to put some of these kids, because some of them are more dynamic than others, but then you love certain components of the other player, like Desnoyers' character or Martin's physicality or Frondell's 200-foot game, the nuances there. So it made things very tricky to try to balance this. We understand from an outside perspective that Martin being ranked this aggressively, we're about to talk about, it makes some sense why some of you listening might have some reservations.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Brady Martin, who's number 4. So I can say it was really close between O'Brien and Martin. Even Frondell, like the 3, 4, 5 spot, was really close, and it did change, back and forth in the last few days before, making the actual final list. Martin, huge improvement. Honestly, from last year to this year, massive improvement by him. Did not have a good season last year. He had some injury, that really affect his game last season. Even though you look at him at the start of the year and you look at him in the second half of the season, there was a major improvement in his game. Mainly, the biggest drawback in his game was his skating. I thought his skating looked, fine at the end of the year. It was not looking fine at the start of the year. So, really good improvement there. You look at the way he plays. Brad, you use the word unicorn. He does not look like a unicorn, but he plays like a unicorn. He's 6 feet, but he's got the farmer strength. He has said he has not focused on hockey training, all that much so far. So that will come now. So I think there's still a lot of growth in his game, but he can do some pretty special things offensively. And then you mix that with his physicality. He has a mean streak. He's a tough, son of a, what. He attacks people very, like, mid like I'd say by midseason, I was like, okay, there's a lot of Sam Bennett with this player, and at that point, like he was not someone that we were thinking about ranking number 4. He was more like around 10, I would say by mid-season, right? But he kept getting better and better and better, and some other guys just their play decreased a bit. So yeah, I think Sam Bennett is a pretty good comparable in the sense of they're not the most, I would say, high end talent, but they do so many good things. Obviously, the physicality, the aggression, the leadership, the way their playoff value also really helps with that rankings. Obviously, we do value, playoff hockey a lot when we do, those rankings. Um, Offensively, you look at what he can do. He can really shoot a puck. Better than Desnoyers. Let's if we compare um, puck skills. I mean, Brad, you made some research. No one has tried more deeks than Martin this season. It does it does make sense because he didn't have a lot of help around him. So the Sioux was not that good of a team. Didn't have much help other than Chase Reed, who's a defenseman who came over from the U.S. I think by November. But that was like the only real solid player on his team to play with him. So I think when he gets to play with better players, maybe as soon as next season, I think you'll see some of his playmaking get a bit better, or at least use his playmaking more than he did um, this year with the Sioux. I think at the U18 we saw a bit more playmaking out of him that usually we saw with the Sioux. A bit more creative, some pretty creative play with Cole Reschny. There's a lot to like with this player, and I get why some people might say, "Oh, for Brady Martin, that's high." And I get it. Like you can make a case Jacob Ryan should be above him. Honestly, after that, I don't know if I would be willing to put Porter Martone above him because of what we saw from Martone this season. Martone is more talented. It's tough to put a guy like Martone above Martin when one guy was not really competing this season and the other one was like at like an insane work rate this season. And then the rest, I wouldn't draft Dinwiddie over Martin. I wouldn't draft maybe Carter Bear. But the injury was maybe like the reason, again, the reason why Carter Bear is a bit lower here. Very unique player, Brady Martin. I think that's a reason why he's up there. Guys like him are really hard to find. Very unique. The playoff value means a lot here, and also no one improved their point per game more than him in the CHL. First half versus second half, much improved in the second half of the season, and again didn't have much to play with the Sioux, who was like one of the worst team in the OHL this season. So, Brad, I'll give you the time here to talk about Brady Martin.
Sure. I'm sure for some of you, it's like, well, just we're overthinking things. Just take the talent. There's other talent here that's like Lakovic's a better talent. Lee, Zarovsky, you like right down through to Hagens, Bear, Martone, Frondell. Like all these players are more talented than this player. That said, as Jerome mentioned, this is a one-off player. It is extremely difficult to find the next Sam Bennett. We think this is the next Sam Bennett. We thought that before these playoffs. That is an incredibly important distinction. We've been talking about the Sam Bennett comp way before Florida was in the playoffs.
Yeah.
We really thought that this would be the guy that could emulate what he did. And it's almost impossible to get these players if they project and hit. So there's a couple very interesting aspects of this player. The first is that, like, for a player who's as aggressive as he is, and admittedly does have individual attacking tunnel vision at times, he can also make like remarkably high-end playmaking plays out of nowhere, like seemingly out of nothing.
Yeah.
So we think that that part of his game is just getting started. And once he gets, as Dro mentioned, line mates, there's not a lot of line mates for him to work with. That will allow him to open up the ice more often. And then as a result of that, he doesn't have to be as experimental with his handling and driving rates as he was this season. He was doing too much this year. There was too much tasked with him, and he didn't have the efficient skating mechanics and the conditioning to be able to match that. So I think that that is one of the reasons that he was a bit sporadic when it came to his handling rates, when it came to his playmaking rates. Now, the other factor that we should mention is that for a lot of people, they think of this player as a third-line player. We do not think that that is true talent-wise. If we factor in growth, we think that this is an Easton Cowan type of trajectory. Okay, with the skating and handling. Easton Cowan was not a very good skater when we first laid eyes on him. He has doubled his speed and stride already. We think Brady Martin will do the same thing. That will open up his game significantly relative to where he currently is. The other factor is that Brady Martin is openly experimenting all the time within his handling, and I don't even think he cares if the error rates pile up. Obviously, that will be self-corrected as he becomes a pro, and he'll have to become much cleaner, much more like a Carter Bear in terms of how he tries to be efficient and operate with his hands. But we love the experimentation and creativity because it's very rare to see in this player type. Usually you get these players just throwing themselves in other opposing players and just being a tremendous agitator. They usually don't have the level of creativity that he has, and they don't have the balancing act that he possesses between having tunnel vision and then opening up his offensive skill set and arsenal for his team. So, you know, it's one of those things where I'm sure some of you think it's super aggressive. And admittedly, on our staff, we didn't all have him top five. We didn't. It was one of those situations where, we go back and forth and on certain players, and we try to factor in growth rate. And I just think at the end of the day, we saw a lot of Easton Cowan. And we were so far right. Mark was very high on Easton Cowan, and so far so good on Easton Cowan. And if he can have that type of projection in terms of growth rate, he's going to be a top six driving center who's one of the most unique players in hockey. We're talking 100 penalty minute, 300 hitter who might put up 55 points and 30 goals. That is so hard to get in the NHL. You take it all day, right? So then we'll end on that. The 30-goal component, he is extremely good at manipulating triangles with the shot. He has a very good release. His shot is better than James Hagens. It's just better. So it's one of those situations where people, I think, have under-ranked his skill and then don't know how to factor in his growth rate correctly, and then haven't taken his team environment into account, we think, to the degree that you should. And if you do that, then you end up with him as a top 10 player for sure. And then you make arguments about the top five, and ultimately we put him in the top five.
Yeah, he has a really strong mental game. I've seen him play in the OHL where, like, okay, he has a matchup against some defensemen. Okay, those are defensemen match up against him. And then what does he do? He goes after them. Like, he's gonna go hit them nonstop on the forecheck. Like, he has really just strong mental mindset that he's just gonna challenge people physically nonstop. And he knows who to hit, which is very similar to Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett really will not go out of his way to hit, but he knows who he needs to hit, and he's gonna challenge those guys. So anyway, that's it for Brady Martin. We'll move on to Anton Frondell out of Djurgården in Sweden. Was my favorite player in watching, this draft. Well, not this draft, but like player from this draft last year. I actually like him more than James Hagens last year. Obviously, Frondell got hurt. He didn't play at the U18. And then that really affected him at the start of the year this season. Didn't seem right, basically, at the start of the year. Like, he was a bit of, out of sync. When you watch him even play watching him play in junior in Sweden in G20, he seemed out of sync. So he was coming back from an injury. He actually got hurt again in August in a tournament in Switzerland. So there's a lot of things going on, and how much of a great offseason that he had training wise. I think it was showing a bit at the start of the year. Like it was not like the best case scenario offseason for him. But I remember like on a podcast, Brad, we said let's remain patient with him. Like this kid's got real legit, talent with his shooting skill, his hands. Let's keep watching him, give him time, and sometimes we do lose patience with prospect, and then sometimes we regret it. We didn't regret that one because once he got really going, he was really good. He had like an amazing two, I would say January, February. Like I don't know if there was any prospect that was hotter than Frondell. In the Allsvenskan, he broke, William Nylander Pasternak record for point per game for a player under 18 in that league. To be fair, the league is not as good as it was, 7, 8, 10 years ago. But still, very impressive work by Frondell in the second half of the season. Played mostly on the wing this season. We still project him as a center, but it could work on the wing too at the NHL level. Um, this season, I felt like he was more of a finisher, like just right time, right place, gets the puck, boom, it's in the net. So we wish he was a more of a play driver this season, but he was last year. He was a play driver last season, so he has everything you want to become a play driver, but he didn't put everything together. But he was really good at finishing plays by, he often play with Victor Eklund, and Eklund is really good passer. So I mean, both guys really play well together. They're great friends. They always spend time together off ice, and it shows with their chemistry on the ice. For me, Frondell, that was my player comp at the start of the year. Not a same level of player, obviously, but there's some Leon Draisaitl in the way he plays, the way he skates, the way he moves on the ice, the way he plays on the power play, how he's an option for the one timer on the right face-off circle. His playmaking is good. I think his playmaking is underrated, Brad. I don't think people give him enough credit for his playmaking. It's obviously not as good as Draisaitl, but just style wise, I really feel like it's somewhat similar to Draisaitl. I know he does compare himself to Alexander Barkov, but I personally don't see it. Like I get it. Like I would want to be Alexander Barkov, like pretty much like the perfect two-way player. But in this case, I don't see it. I don't. I think maybe it's the fact that he's does not really play. He didn't play center this season was maybe a reason why I don't see it, because like Barkov's an incredible player away from the puck and in defensive situation, and I just didn't see Frondell play in those situations this year as a winger. Um, and the fact that is when he played center with the national team, he was a bit disappointing. The last tournament of the year, he was really not good. Even the February one, I didn't think he was that good either. The junior A challenge in December, I thought it was probably his best tournament of the year, but I didn't think he was fantastic either at that tournament. So uh, I really like Frondell. I really push for him at number 3. I just think he has not put everything together yet. Even with that, I still think he had a pretty pretty good season. Um, I just think there's a lot more coming for him. I just think the potential going forward, he's gonna get much better. Some people think he's like a finished product, and I'm so much in disagreement with this. I think he has much more development ahead of him. And then the main thing I want to see improve is I want to see him drive the play more. But he has all the tools to be that. He just has not, put it together. And I know, Brad, you mentioned to me this season, there are other Swedish players that are fantastic NHLer right now. They were not play driver in their draft year. I think Philip Forsberg was one.
David Pastrnak.
Yeah, and Jesper Bratt.
Jesper Bratt.
Yeah.
Jesper Bratt. Yeah.
So
they didn't drive nearly the degree in Allsvenskan that they do now.
So
sure.
I think for Frondells is what you see right now is probably not what you're going to have in a few years. He just needs a bit more time. The injury were a bit hard on him in the last year and a half. So I'm giving him more time. I still really like his season. Mostly from December on, I would say was his best hockey of the season. So I'll give you the microphone right now, but I have good faith in this player and becoming I think possibly the third best player of this draft class.
So Frondell, the big things with Frondell is that he has some of the best attention to detail in the entire class, bar none. I think that's where some of the Barkov comparison can align. If you look at Brad Marchand in the playoffs, one thing that he does better than basically any other player when I was watching was the stick pressing. He was unbelievable at stick pressing and using stick presses in conjunction with his handling to be able to bypass bigger defensemen. Frondell is one of the best stick pressers I've ever seen at his age. His attention to detail in general is like just spectacular. He's also a physical force of nature, but he is coming off, as Drew mentioned, the major knee surgery. So it's one of those situations where we think he's going to come to a totally different level of skating in the coming years, and we think his handling rates will also improve. That said, if Jerome and myself are wrong and he stays a winger, we're okay with that because he should win more battles all day long. He's also one of the best forecheckers in this class. He also has the best wheelhouse one-timer in this class. His one-timer is spectacular. I would argue it's probably the best one-timer we've seen since Ovechkin's. Like, it's right up there. It really is right up there. It's probably one of the best we've seen. It's unbelievable what he can do on a power play with his wheelhouse. So low end, if things go wrong, he'll be a complimentary top six sniper that gets you 30 goals, and defensively he's very responsible and does very good things for you. High end, we're looking at some sort of Draisaitl, Barkov, something else hybrid that can do absolutely everything, takes games over and puts it all together and is unstoppable. Literally, he's going to be unstoppable. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with him, but he's a very unique player. And I mean, look at the players we've talked about for comparison's sake. Like, he's dominated. Like, the Allsvenskan numbers are real, right? Like, they're very, very real. So, and that's with him at his disadvantage. He's coming off a surgery. He couldn't even train properly. And he put up those numbers. So we'll see what he can do in the. Let's put it this way: if he was in the queue, okay, if he's in the queue with Desnoyers. If he was on Moncton instead of Desnoyers, I think people might be talking about him a bit different. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. All right. I mean, the player combo are always like very tricky to do because if I say Leon Draisaitl, I don't think he's going to be as good as Leon Draisaitl. I just think style wise they feel similar, but it's not the same. It's not the same high end skill level. As much as his shot is incredible, that is an elite skill that he has is his one timer. I'm not saying he's the next Leon Draisaitl.
I'm not saying he's the next Ovechkin.
Yeah.
Don't keep it.
All right, let's move on to number 2. Michael Misa of Saginaw, really interesting player. We didn't start the year really high on him. Did not have a good season, in 23-24, but start the season a bit slowly for us. But it took us you know, I mean, a few more viewings to really get really comfortable with him as our number two guy. There was at some point there was a pretty good debate between him and versus Hagens, um, and then it quickly it
Yeah,
quickly
that's
was not a debate anymore. Yeah, so Misa, I think you're getting a guy who can play center, can play on the wing. He played on the wing most of last season. This season it was mostly at center, but he does sometimes feel more as a winger than a center. For me, he's a good skater. One thing about him is that we really like his play away from the puck. Like I would say he does have some defensive issue that he needs to fix sometime, but his ability to take the puck away from other players is really good. I mean, he's not Pavel Datsyuk, but it's really good. He's got a really good active stick. Um, and I would say one of his best quality is his sense of timing. He knows, like he has this. I don't even know how to describe this, but he has this ability to know exactly where he needs to be. He's going to be at a spot in the O zone for like 0.5 second, and he's going to get the puck, and it's in the net. And we've seen it's not just a one-time thing. We've seen this happen all year. How many backdoor goals,
a
Brad?
lot.
Yeah. So he's really good at that. And then I think one thing we mentioned during the season on our podcast and was maybe the playmaking was maybe up and down for us. That's why I think sometimes I feel maybe he could be a better winger at the NHL level. But from interview, he said he's more, he feels better as a center than a winger. So we'll see what happens in the future over that because he does have like good instinct to one day be a good two-way center, and he's got good hands. Obviously, his skating is good. He's got decent size. He needs to get stronger physically. He's still a bit weak, so I don't think he's NHL ready. But we'll see. Like he's gonna have a big summer ahead of him. There was also rumors about him going college for one season. So who knows? I feel like it's just a new, with the NCAA door opening right now for a CHL player, it's just going to be pretty wild what we're going to have to, what we're going to see in the next, over the summer, basically, with some really high end talent. So yeah, Misa is really good. I mean, look at the season he had. I mean, I think one quote that I had is like, he can't do anything wrong. There's everything he does on the ice ends up in the net, basically. So very good. I mean, very good. Excellent season. One of the best seasons for any draft, eligible player in recent years. I think Connor Bedard had like the best season in recent years, but for a CHL player, it's probably maybe the second best that I can remember the last, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years. 60 plus goals, 130 points. So really impressive season by him. Looks like I think he has first line potential. Maybe Brad, you want to add some stuff on Michael Misa?
Sure. So didn't have the best playoffs. That was one thing we bring up relative to Martone and some others. He fell a little bit flat. Saginaw, if we could take every scout quote about Saginaw and their structure of play, it would make sense as to why Saginaw didn't do as well in the playoffs. This is a weird player, so let's generalize this a bit. If there's anything we want to see a bit more of down the line, it's his play driving capacity to go up a bit, I think, offensively.
Mm-hmm.
That's this entire class, right? So if you look at Frondell, O'Brien, Misa, Martone, Hagens, those specific players, they don't drive possession nearly to the degree that you would theoretically want to see in top 10 players. That's just the reality of it right now. So there's more projection than we've ever really had to do from that perspective. And it's made our life very difficult. That said, the reason we have Misa too is that when you factor in his skating mechanics, which are extremely good, and his efficiency, then we think that it's the most likely that he can become the driver of given time, because Martone is slightly knock-kneed, O'Brien's far behind power-wise. Martin and Bear, you could argue, are better drivers already, but they're a bit more limited when it comes to their overall toolkits offensively. And so this is why Misa is essentially ended up in our 2 slot. The way that Jerome mentions the timing, it really reminds me of Michkov. This player is basically, to me, a much faster, more versatile 6-1 version of Matvei Michkov. And that's right through the sense to the mechanics of the shot. So when you look at Michkov, and I've talked about this several times, but it's not that he overwhelms goalies with his mechanics like Ovechkin or some of these other high-end shooters like Alex Semin back in the day. It's not like that. It's that sixth sense of seam identification, and then it's that sixth sense of how the goalie is operating and transitioning between saves. Right? That there's a nuance there that is specialized, and it's instinctual and it's inherent. You do not improve on that aspect. It's actually one of the reasons Pavel Dorofeyev translated for us, Jerome. Maybe it's one of the reasons Rofsky does too. But Misa has that in an elite level, just like Michkov. And what that means is that he might not have the hardest shot. Okay, mechanically, he's not the most gifted shooter in this class, even though his goals might suggest that he's not. What it is that he has this otherworldly sense of where a goalie's going to be and where a defenseman's going to go and how he can exploit that in coverage. And that's just like Michkov. He'll sneak backdoor at exactly the right moment. Okay, as Jerome mentioned, the tap-in goals were endless. When Misa is firing on all cylinders, he makes the game look extremely easy. That's usually what prodigies do. Prodigies just, when Connor McDavid's in full flight and he's feeling it, you can't stop him. Michael Misa has a bit of that, where when he's really feeling his game, good luck. He'll out-time you, he'll out-think you, he'll out-space you, he'll out-deceive you. Those are the components that make Michael Misa very special. The playmaking rates, they need to improve a bit. We think they can get there. The skating, he skates very well, but he can be stationary too often, given how good his skating is. That's where the pace isn't always as high as it could be. He doesn't play flat-out hockey. There can be a limiting quality there. If he played the game like Carter Bear, we have nothing to worry about. We're good to go, but he doesn't. And that's where there's a bit of hesitation. That's where there's a bit of a conflict when trying to decide where he actually ultimately places. We ended up with him at 2 still because of the talent. He's a prodigy. He does think the game like Michkov. He does have the backdoor entry points. There are so many components to him that allows him to be a difference maker. So not your typical class. We need more very basic components in some areas. We need driving rates to go up through the roof with some of these kids. We just do. And some of them are lacking huge components, but Misa doesn't lack them nearly to the degree that some of the others do. And that's why it's this high.
Yeah. It's just the team of this draft, honestly, like so many, this is like our second ranked player, but like you can say the same thing about Frondell, O'Brien, Martone. A lot of those players are missing one, special quality. I think this draft, maybe in 5-7 years, we're gonna look back and be like, "Whoa, it did not pan out like we thought it would pan out." Because like there's a lot of kind of like we have to make some bet on some of those guys that they will figure it out. Like Frondell, he's gonna figure. We think he's gonna figure it out, but what happens if he does not? Misa has some stuff that could be better and are a bit concerning, I would say, if you're talking about a second overall guy, but he still remains, based on what we know about this class, like he still remains the second best player in this class. So it's just this draft is I don't know. It's a tough. It was a really difficult draft to scout this year, and really difficult to rank. That top 10, that top 32, because a lot of players are missing certain skill or quality that makes their projection a lot harder. And speaking of players that is missing something, our number one ranked player is Matthew Schaeffer, and what is he missing? Game played. uh, did not play a lot this year, obviously. Under 20 games, but he showed enough for us. He showed enough for us to rank him number one. We ranked him number one before everyone else. We had him number one mid-November. I would argue, Brad, if I look back, it's actually a discussion you and I had. You can make a case he's the best defenseman to go in the draft since 2017 with Kel McCarr, Miro Iskinen. That draft, I think he's better than Owen Power. I think he's better than Rasmus Dahlin, and we love Rasmus Dahlin, but we feel pretty good about Schaeffer being above Dahlin. First of all, he seems like a really great kid. Everything that he has gone through off the ice. Very impressive how he has dealt with this. Brilliant skater. I really like his skating ability. Like, he's not even powerful yet. His skating will only gonna get better, but technically it's really solid. He does have, like, if you watch him handle the puck, he almost seems like a forward. Like, his ability to beat player one on one with his stick handling is really impressive. He's definitely going to be, we project him as a number one defenseman, as a number one power play guy. He's going to be on your first penalty kill. Like, he blocks shots. He's a team guy. He still has some stuff to learn defensively, and that just shows you, like, he has not played a ton of game, but it's nothing is like worrisome about his playing his own zone. He just needs to play more to gain that experience. There's a ton to like about him. He's smart. He's creative. At the U20, obviously a lot has been made about his injury. But you just have to look at how Team Canada played with him and how Team Canada play without him. Like, he is the youngest player on the team, and he was the best player. Actually, Gavin McKenna was younger than him, but just the impact that he had on the team as a 17 years old defenseman in this tournament. When he got hurt, the team completely collapsed. So I think he had a lot of impact on the team, just not offensively, but at both ends of the ice, with his transition play, puck moving. Like, their decor was struggling with moving pucks out of their zone. I mean, he's really good at this. It is his best asset. So there's a lot to like with Schaeffer. I'll finish with this, Brad. I'll say, do not play him in the NHL next year. Do not play him in the NHL, please. Let him go back to the AHL if he wants to, or go to college for 1 year. But that kid needs to play games, but not in the NHL. He needs to play against, kids his own age group or a bit older, like in college. But I'm really hoping if the Islanders do take him first overall, they don't need him right now. They don't need him. Just send him back to the OHL, or if he wants to go to college, playing in a big school, let him do it. But do not play him in the NHL this year. Maybe if he goes back to the OHL, maybe you give him a few games to start the year in the NHL. But let him play one more season to develop, and maybe at 19, this is where really he makes his impact at the NHL level. There's just no need for him to play in the NHL next season. The kid played not even 20 games this season, so give him time. Brad, I'll give you the last word on Matthew Schaeffer.
Yeah, for some, I'm sure hearing that he might be better than Rasmus Dahlin is surprising, because Dahlin was for sure more hyped. But it's interesting in terms of how that occurs, because Dahlin was known for a long time, right? Like, Schaeffer, was already very good, but was nowhere near at the level of hype at 15, 16 that Deline was. So there's a bit of I think a bit of a misunderstanding there in terms of his skill set, because I would say this is the least hyped first overall pick ever, and he's really good. Like, he's actually insanely talented and good. So probably a bit under Makar offensively, but he's ahead defensively, I think, of both Makar and Hughes at the same age. He's one of the youngest players in the draft. He has unlimited potential. To be honest with you, it's funny, we've gone very in depth to some of these players. The problem with this player going in depth, there's no deficiencies. That's why he's where he is. He's a driver. That's what we want. We finally have a driver. He is everything. Is a 200-foot game. He keeps a fantastic pace of play. He's physical. He can move pucks. He can drive possession. He can come up as the F4 and do anything he wants. He's for sure a power play one, and he's going to dominate. He's going to be absolutely dominant. The Islanders very lucky to grab him. They got Gidloff, who I think in a redraft right now is the best goalie in the last couple of years, really, of the goalie part. So they got Gidloff, and now they got Schaeffer, and that's a good start. That's a good little core base there in the last couple drafts anyway. So probably a point per game defenseman, I would say, and absolutely dominant both ends of the ice, and doesn't need a ton of time, but I'm with Jerome. He needs a bit of time to cook. You can't be sending him in the NHL off of a 20-game sample. But I know for some of you it's a bit surprising, but one way we look at this for us is like, for everybody who doesn't know who we are, we were the first to have Matthew Schaeffer publicly ranked 1. We were the first to suggest that this was the number 1 player in the draft. So he never let up. And much like Macklin Celebrini, we didn't really have any discussions about this. There was no, well, should be 1. There was none whatsoever. And then obviously when Hagens started to go south on us and other players didn't drive possession at the degree we wanted, it just became extremely easy for us.
We like Misa, but never enough to put him above, Schaeffer. I think there's a pretty good gap between the two of them. So that's why if I'm San Jose, I'm pretty pissed having lost the lottery, because I think Schaeffer would have been a great fit with, Schaeffer and Celebrini together. Like, God.
Oh man.
Ooh, yeah.
That power play.
So that's a big drop from 1 to 2 here. It reminds me of like 2004 where, Ovechkin and Malkin won 1-2, and then third overall it's Cam Barker.
It's a different type of player, yeah.
Quite the drop here. I'll finish with this. Brad, you can react to this if you want, but obviously Schaeffer is really good. We think he's really good. But I think the perception on him makes him maybe the most underrated player in the whole draft. Like, the number 1 ranked player is the most underrated player in the draft.
He is, yeah. Yeah, people don't understand how good this kid is.
Unless, Brad, you want to add something, I think we're done here. It's been a long night of recording. We have been recording for 6 hours now?
I got to catch a plane in like an hour. I got to get out of here soon.
So yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoy every single minute of this breakdown of our top 32. It's in 2 parts, obviously. So we have been talking a lot.
We're not done either. We still got the draft, mock draft we're going to do. We still got the dark horse prospects we're going to do. There's a lot of depth, Jerome. We got to get through those dark horses. There's some depth we got to talk about for sure.
Yeah,
so
we need to find the time to do it. It's going to be pretty hectic last week of the draft. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. We'll be back with more content soon. So check out hockeyprospect.com on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. As we're recording this, we're about 150 subscriber away from 1,000. It'd be nice to get to 1,000 before the draft, but I'm confident we're gonna get there. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll be back pretty soon.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for listening.